Please welcome to the Intersect stage, Kristen Verderame, ITI board member and Vice President, Global Government Relations at NetApp.
Ooh, bright light. Hi, everyone. That wasn't a very good applause. I don't know. Are you all asleep after lunch? Come on. Well, welcome, everyone. It's great to have you here. It's my honor to welcome you to the second annual Intersect Tech and Policy Summit. My name is Kristen Verderame. I run Global Government Relations for NetApp, and I am very proud as well to serve on the ITI Board of Directors. This is a great crowd we have here today. I don't think everyone's all in from lunch. Everyone's chit-chatting a little bit, which is okay. But we also have a lot of people online, over 1,000 people registered to participate in this, which is awesome, very exciting. I think that's testament to all that is currently happening on tech policy today. It's not really a surprise there's such interest, considering the level of speakers that we have today. In our world in tech, it really is never a dull moment, and there's no exception to that right now. Technology continues to evolve, as it always does, but this year has been a landmark year for innovation, with generative AI exploding onto the scene and grabbing everyone's attention, much to some of our dismay. Did I hear at lunch 10 congressional bills each year for the next 10 years? That's a lot. But somehow it seems to me that at this time we're at an important inflection point. Many of the issues we're working on these days may truly determine the course of our future. Therefore, it's fitting that we've taken advantage of the opportunity presented by today's conference to bring together smart minds from all different backgrounds, professions, and opinions to tackle these topics head-on. So today, we're going to be taking stock of some of the major tech policy milestones that have transpired over the past year. We'll discuss the Biden AI Executive Order, known to many of us as the gift that never stops giving, with the very people setting the vision for AI in the US federal government. We'll also get an update on how the CHIPS and Science Act is impacting main streets across America. Cybersecurity and AI in particular stand at the forefront of today's digital landscape. Around the world, the current state of cybersecurity reflects an ever-growing need for robust measures to safeguard our digital infrastructure. With cyber threats and increasingly sophisticated attacks continuing to proliferate, including through the use of AI, the imperative for collaboration between the public and private sectors has never been more apparent. Which is why, as someone who's been in the cybersecurity world for many years, I will not admit how many in front of this very large audience, I am thrilled that we will hear today from not just one, but two of the world's foremost cybersecurity leaders this afternoon. I had the pleasure to meet one of them backstage a few moments ago. National Cyber Director Harry Coker will be taking the stage momentarily. I have been lucky to have had the opportunity to attend and host many tech forums, as have many of you, and work with many trade associations over the years. And I can tell you that this event and this organization really do stand apart. ITI is truly comprehensive on tech policy, covering the full tech waterfront of policy issues, and truly global, which are tremendous benefits to NetApp and the other 79 member companies. These member companies, many of whom are with us here today in the room, it's great to see all of you here, welcome, are a veritable who's who of top tech talent from across the world. So welcome. We're glad to have everyone together in one place. I also want to give a special welcome to our virtual audience who is joining us online, to our friends in Europe, Asia, Australia, South America, or anywhere else. We're really glad that you're here with us today as well. Of course, this event would not have been possible without the generous support of our sponsors and ITA member companies. So let me give special thanks to Accenture, Amazon, Cisco Systems, Cognizant, Ericsson, MasterCard, Meta, my own organization, NetApp, Nielsen, Qualcomm, Sage, Salesforce, and Siemens for their sponsorship of today's program. I'll now ask you to silence your phones, turn off your ringers, but don't put them away. We will invite you to share the Intersect experience with your audiences. Tweet, post, engage on social media however you like as we move through today's programming. You'll find us on Twitter at ITI_TechTweets and at hashtag #TheIntersect2024. So go ahead and post away all day long, please. We'll also be doing some digital polls throughout the program, and you'll need your phones to participate in those. You'll see instructions showing up on the screen as we go. As you can see here, you'll be able to scan the QR code or go to the Pigeonhole web address and enter your code to join. Your submissions will be anonymous, and we appreciate your participation. So let's get the ball rolling. It's my great pleasure to welcome Jason Oxman to the stage. He is the president and CEO of ITI, our fearless leader, and will be introducing our opening keynote speaker. Jason?
Thanks, Kristen, for getting us kicked off. And hi, everybody. It's so great to see you. Actually, I can't see any of you, but if the light weren't shining in my face, it would be great to see you, and we really appreciate your taking time out to be with us today. It's an exciting day. As Kristen noted, we have an amazing lineup. We've already had some terrific, great speakers, and we have even more to come. So on behalf of the whole ITI team, thank you so much for being here with us today. It is now my great honor to welcome our opening keynote speaker, who's going to start the Intersect off for us, National Cyber Director Harry Coker. Harry Coker is a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, the Naval Postgraduate School, and the Georgetown University Law Center. Director Coker has received numerous accolades from across his many years of service to our nation, such as the National Intelligence Distinguished Service Medal for exceptional service. He has served as the executive director of the NSA. He also played a strategic role across the intelligence community, including extensive experience at CIA as well, marked by leadership in digital innovation, in science and technology and public affairs. It showcases his commitment to excellence, and I can say that our nation is very lucky that he has decided to return to service as the National Cyber Director. This is his first speech in Washington since being confirmed to the role, so I ask you all to please join me in welcoming to the Intersect stage National Cyber Director Harry Coker.
Good afternoon. Delighted to be here, and thank you, Jason, for the gracious introduction. Made me wonder who he was talking about, but I'll take it. I'm excited to join you all this afternoon to kick off this event, and probably surmised by the cane and shoes that I had a procedure not long ago. Actually, I had my left knee replaced 2 weeks ago, so I may not be able to kick this off in the fashion I'd like to. I still can't get into my dress shoes, so I hope you'll forgive me for wearing Air Jordans. I heard I needed to kick this thing off, so I'll take the power of any athlete, especially the GOAT, to get it done. But in all seriousness, I am honored to stand before you as the nation's second National Cyber Director, and I'm particularly pleased to be here at ITI's Intersect Summit. You all have been great collaborators, and we are grateful to an organization like ITI for helping to create opportunities for engagement that drive meaningful change. And at the Office of the National Cyber Director, ONCD, we like to say engage early and often. So I'm here early in my tenure, and you can expect to see me back, frankly, on a regular basis, if Jason will have me anyway. Been in the job actually for a little over 7 weeks, and I have to tell you that I was humbled, but also quite excited to be called back to serve. I don't know that any other position could have brought me out of my second retirement, but this one, due to the potential to make a lasting impact for our nation, was an easy decision for me. But after 43 years in the Navy and in the intelligence community, it truly is a privilege to help a new and critical office contribute to the safety and the prosperity of the American people. But one thing you should know about me, I love to solve hard problems. And that was a driving factor in my decision to return to government service. And again, to quote the GOAT, Michael Jordan, obstacles don't have to stop you. If you run into a wall, don't turn around and give up. Figure out how to climb it and go through it or work around it. You see, hard problems really do energize me. I grew up as a Cold War sailor in the Navy when our nation faced the hard problem of the Soviet Union. And as a part of the intelligence community, I was extremely proud to take on what we now refer to as the Great Power Competition. Part of my contribution to those efforts included incorporating the open source enterprise into the agency's Directorate of Digital Innovation and also integrated into the mission centers. All of those challenges were hard, but cybersecurity is a different kind of a hard problem. It stems from the threat, which is very real and persistent. One example, amongst many, is the threat from the People's Republic of China. Last week, I had the honor of testifying in front of the House Select Committee focused on the Chinese Communist Party with my colleagues from across the federal government, in particular, CISA Director Easterly, FBI Director Wray, and my friend and former boss, General Nakasone, the recently retired Commander of U.S. Cyber Command and Director of NSA. But it was an important moment for us to appear together to articulate the full measure of the threat posed by China and to demonstrate coherence and collaboration across our federal enterprise. Cyber actors from the People's Republic of China are actively working to gain access into our nation's critical infrastructure systems with the purpose of disruption or worse, destruction. In the early stages of armed conflict, they want to disrupt our military's ability to mobilize and to impact the systems that allow us to thrive in our increasingly digital world. Their intention is to drive home a point that so many of us have known for years. In cyberspace, the private sector, as well as the American people themselves, are on the front lines. And as we all know, the vast majority of the critical infrastructure in our nation is owned and operated by the private sector. Folks, protecting and defending America from the growing number of cyber threats is a hard problem. Ensuring the short and long-term protection, defense, and resilience of the systems that underpin our increasingly digital way of life is a hard problem. And ensuring that the internet remains open, free, global, interoperable, reliable, and importantly, secure, anchored in universal values that respect human rights and fundamental freedoms is a hard problem. Harder still is what we do about it. After all, belligerent states have postured their military forces aggressively for millennia. America has had plenty of success responding to hostile actions outside the domain of cyberspace. But as we said last week, the risk we face within the cyberspace today is unacceptable. There are plenty of actions that we have, can, and will take to address counter-normative behavior. And the necessity to partner with so many of you in this room is absolutely essential. How do we collectively seize the initiative from our adversaries? How do we take the talent at your organizations and channel our collective energy towards countering the growing number of malicious actors? How do we collectively leverage the amazing technologies you all create, which improve the ways we work, live, and play, and ensure that they are a source of strength and not vulnerability? And not just a vulnerability to your companies or to the federal government. How do we truly help local governments or the schools and hospitals struggling to protect themselves, or one of the more than 50,000 public water systems spread across our great nation? Thankfully, the President has started us out on the right foot. From the very beginning of this administration, President Biden made cybersecurity a priority. He brought in some outstanding people, and some of them will be with you here today. My dear friend, Ann Neuberger, the Deputy National Security Advisor at the National Security Council, who will join you all later this afternoon, has made incredible progress. From driving the development of the Executive Order 14028 to pushing for the creation of Cyber Trustmark. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my White House colleague, Mayor Steve Benjamin, formerly of Columbia, South Carolina, but currently the Director of Public Engagement. You'll see him this afternoon. But his outreach on behalf of the administration is key to strengthening our partnerships and delivering outcomes. At ONCD, we have been lucky to have had Chris Inglis and Kimball Walden set our organization on the right course. True champions of this office and our mission. And I am proud and lucky to build upon the foundation that those two leaders set for us. We're also standing on the shoulders and the wisdom of Congress, who established the Office of National Cyber Director in 2021 following a recommendation by the Cyberspace Solarium Commission. I was pleased to meet with many of those commissioners last week, and I can tell you their insight continues to be of great value to me and frankly to all of us. But leaders know that you can't tackle hard problems without good people. It also takes a good plan and some good old-fashioned grit. And I'm hopeful that this group has heard quite a bit about the National Cybersecurity Strategy and the two bold shifts that it calls for. Number one, shifting the responsibility away from individuals and small businesses and onto the larger institutions capable of bearing more responsibility in cyberspace. And number two, realigning incentives to favor long-term investment in cybersecurity. That's been said before, and I agree with it, but allow me to share my take on this important strategy. I see it as bold because of the underlying vision and the tenacity. The work of the office sets out explicitly the hard problems that we have to solve, and it takes them head on. The strategy says we have to take problems like the fact that the internet was built on insecure foundations, so we're finally implementing improvements to the Border Gateway Protocol. The strategy says we need to hold software manufacturers accountable when they rush insecure code to market. So we're working with the academic community and legal experts to explore different liability regimes. We will soon be engaging with you to hear the private sector perspective. The strategy says that smart regulations minimize the compliance burden on companies. So we're working with partners across the interagency to harmonize requirements and using the feedback that many of you have already provided us in response to our request for information. The strategy says we need to develop a diverse and robust national cyber workforce to meet the challenge of this decisive decade. So we are working aggressively to build and foster ecosystems and communities across the nation to fill the more than 500,000 cyber jobs that are available today. To that end, I've already been to a job fair and career event at the Community College of Baltimore County, and thrilled to have heard from an incredible array of students, faculty, and employers. It was great to see, and we made progress. We had some employers that had not visited that institution before and came away impressed, so we're going to follow up on that, and we'll be doing similar events across the country, exposing people to opportunities. But every one of the problems that I mentioned is hard in its own right, and each of the ones I mentioned has been studied for decades. Each remains pernicious, but unresolved. And what makes the National Cybersecurity Strategy bold is its clarity that the hard problems, issues once deemed too complicated, are precisely what we need to tackle in order to seize the initiative from the adversaries that would do our nation harm. Now, my predecessors at ONCD made a clear commitment to transparency and accountability by publishing the National Cybersecurity Implementation Plan, an act, as a former program manager, I found impressive as I've come to watch the team put their shoulder to the wheel every day with our counterparts across the interagency. Trust is built on openness, and we commit to you that when we do report on our progress, you will hear about not just where we succeeded, but where we came up short, with the intent of getting better. And in the coming months, you will see us report on the efforts to date and the next phase of the strategy's implementation. And I'll say one additional thing about the strategy's implementation plan. Policy solutions are not self-executing. It's true that developing solutions to the hard problems in cyberspace is a fundamental responsibility of our office, but so is carrying them to fruition. Thankfully, I'm not alone. There are 80 incredible patriots that I get to work with every day, experts who hail from industry, civil society, federal agencies, and Capitol Hill. Their work includes putting the good ideas, the powerful solutions, the thoughtful strategy into practice to improve the digital foundation of this nation and to make our nation safer. I'm excited about the work that ONCD's talented staff is leading on the open research problem of software measurability that makes it difficult to understand the quality of code that we use. That work has in its seed a 2016 NIST paper that we are continuing to make progress on. We're also pushing government and private sector coders to ensure Secure by Design incorporates memory-safe programming languages. Some of the most dangerous vulnerabilities that criminals look to exploit are memory safety bugs, and memory-safe coding languages prevent those errors from ever making it into production. And yet, developers have been slow to adopt them, even though many have existed for years. In the coming weeks, you'll see us put out a paper that addresses both memory safety and software measurability. Additionally, we're developing guidance to help agencies eliminate unnecessary degree requirements for contracted cybersecurity positions. While this has been mandated for years, it's another tough challenge that has yet to be fully implemented. In many cases, it turns out implementing the solution is the hardest part of all. That will take partnership. Recall that the first shift in the strategy is about rebalancing responsibility in cyberspace to the most capable actors. That means the government, yes. It also means all the organizations represented in the room today and all of you. It will take committed partnership to ensure that the cloud improves cybersecurity and not become a source of heightened systemic concentrated risk. It will take meaningful partnership to stop adversaries from using our own systems, whether virtual private sectors as home or office routers, to launch their attacks. It will take sustained partnership to bring coherence to the federal mission and coordination to unwind the sea of licenses that agencies deal with on a daily basis. And it will take innovative partnership in your technological know-how to scale solutions that protect pipelines delivering gas to homes in Minneapolis or to the hospital providing life-saving care in my hometown in Parsons, Kansas. It will not be easy, and that is why the National Cybersecurity Strategy is our North Star. I appreciate that the strategy traces its lineage back 25 years. That tells me that the cyber was and remains a bipartisan issue. That tells me that the public-private partnership was and remains core to our success. That also tells me, after a quarter of a century, we're still dealing with some of the same tough problems. The Office of the National Cyber Director was built for this challenge. We have the team, we have the vision, and we have the responsibility to make sure that we're not scratching our heads at the same hard problems in 2050. It's time to get it done. So I say again, please continue to collaborate with us in a true partnership. That means telling us the truth, even when you think we don't want to hear it. Let us know what's working and what's not. Keep giving us your feedback and your ideas, and join us in solving the hard problems for the sake of our nation's security and prosperity. Thank you.
Joining us now, Jason Oxman, President and CEO of ITI, with David Zapolsky, Senior Vice President of Global Public Policy and General Counsel at Amazon.
Well, hi, David, and welcome to the Intersect. Our thanks to Director Coker. Terrific to have him here for his first speech inside Washington after his appointment to this important role. At ITI, we bring policymakers to tell us what we need to be thinking about, but then it's also equally, if perhaps not more important, for us to have conversations with industry leaders about how we should be crafting our story as advocates for technology here in Washington and around the world. So I'm so thrilled to have David here with us today to help us think through the important policy issues of the day. So David, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Jason, and it's an honor to be here. It's a privilege and an honor, and it's great to be able to engage with this larger community on these important issues.
Well, ITI has been around since 1916, so we're 108 years old if I'm doing the math. Amazon's not quite that old, but you've been with Amazon for a number of years, almost since the beginning, 24 years, if I have the number right. Tell us about how your role has evolved and what you're responsible for at Amazon today.
Well, it wasn't the beginning for sure, but I joined in the fall of 1999. I was the first and only litigation and regulatory attorney to be at Amazon back then. The legal department was about 15 people, and the company's revenues were just over $1 billion. I did that for a dozen years, and sort of grew with the company and built out a department. And a dozen years later, my boss retired and asked me to take her job. And so I became general counsel in 2012. The company was about $61 billion in revenue, and the legal department was about 250 people. Fast forward to today, and last year I actually had the opportunity to step into the leadership of our global public policy organization, which is an additional several hundred people of really, as this room knows, more than most, really top-notch people. And so we're over 500 billion in revenue, and the teams together are more than 2,000 people all over the world. So it's been an amazing journey. I feel incredibly lucky, very privileged. I think I have the most interesting job for somebody trained as a lawyer that one can possibly have, and it's going to be hard to convince me that that's not true.
Well, as a recovering lawyer myself, I can agree that these kind of jobs are more interesting than a lot of the other things you can do coming out of law school. So that's quite a journey, and obviously Amazon, as an ITI member and as a core participant in the tech policy discussions, has a lot to share and a lot to offer. We're going to talk about AI in particular in a minute. But as you discussed your own journey within the company, I can imagine the company itself has changed a lot over the 24 years that you've been there as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. In some ways, it's changed immensely. I mean, we're so much larger. I don't even come close to knowing the first names of all the people who work for me, which is disconcerting. I don't actually like that aspect of it. I think about when I took over, even from when I took over as general counsel, I couldn't have imagined in 2012 Alexa, 100 767s that we fly around as part of our logistics network, satellites, movie studios. Even since 2012, we've had to grow and adapt and build those businesses, and that includes lawyers and public policy people who know the issues in those spaces. And so It's been a constant exercise in building. And I stopped, somewhere around 2008, when we launched devices, I stopped trying to sort of predict the future at all. And at the same time, I still see a lot of the same faces that were around when I walked in the door. Andy Jassy was there. A lot of my senior leadership were there. One of the guys on my team was on my interview loop. And we still talk about the company and think about the company in a lot of the same ways. And as you probably know, one of our big priorities is to really stay focused on our culture, to try to remain a day one oriented company, which really means staying nimble, staying lean, making decisions quickly, making sure we're not too big to slow down, that causes us to slow down. So, and that's not easy, and we worry a lot about that. So in many ways it's changed, and in many ways it hasn't. And I think that the ways that it hasn't has been a strength for the company.
So let's talk about the tech policy landscape, and I want to particularly focus on AI because I know that's been a lot of focus of the work that's happening at Amazon around generative AI. Obviously, as we've heard today from Dr. Locascio, the head of NIST, who we heard from earlier, from Jay Obernolte, the member of Congress from California's 23rd, who's literally the only person in Congress with an AI graduate degree. Industry has an incredibly important role to play in informing policymakers here in the US and around the world about the benefits of AI. We hear about all the scary stuff. People love to talk about how AI is going to end the world. But as a practical matter, we in industry are not focused on that. We're focused on telling the positive stories and telling the good that can come from it. So can you share with us, in the first instance, let's talk about what Amazon's doing with generative AI and what the AI roadmap looks like. And then we can talk about how we can tell that story to policymakers in a way that helps the innovation thrive.
Sure. Well, for a long time, I resisted the term AI at all. I wouldn't allow it in my office because it really is yet another application of a variety of machine learning techniques. We've been involved in machine learning, investing in machine learning in every aspect of our business for a long time. It's behind the recommendations engine that tells you what books you might be interested in. It's in our fulfillment centers in terms of optimizing process paths. It's part of Alexa, and so we are very familiar with machine learning, and generative large language models, Gen LLM, is a new application of that type of technology that obviously is incredibly exciting and brings a lot of possibilities. And so we're fully investing in that as well. Amazon actually has a sort of three-tiered approach to AI, which I now have to use as part of my contract. We're at the base foundation layer where we've been working on chips that are optimized for training algorithms and doing machine learning and AI inferences. The Trainium and Inferentia are specially designed chips that we've been working on that will make it much more cost-effective for companies to build these models. There's a middle layer that we've built into Amazon Web Services that most easily accessed through a service like Bedrock, which gives our customers, our enterprise customers, the ability to access a whole variety of different large language models and experiment with them and use them all within the sort of safe confines of AWS. And we built security around that. We built a number of guardrails around that to help customers be able to do that safely and responsibly. And then there's this third layer that's the sort of consumer-facing or business-facing application, which is ChatGPT, or we'll soon see how Rufus goes, which is a shopping assistant that we announced last week on Amazon. And I think that the AI will radically transform some of the things we do, but it won't happen overnight. And we're going to experiment. You're going to see our customers experiment with different third-level customer-facing apps that use this technology. And some are going to be mind-blowingly great and change our lives, and some might not be. Some might kind of suck. And we'll see which ones are which. But I don't think they're hard. They're not easy to build. They're not going to build themselves. In some cases, can be expensive. So we have some time to figure out what this is and isn't. I like the way that Amazon has gone about getting into this space, both providing it, democratizing it, if you will, for customers, but also investing in our own models and making those available.
And given that breadth of policy issues that arise from the breadth of business uses of AI, I wanted to ask you about how you're approaching the regulatory environment. It's one thing for me to rely on AI in my Amazon Prime Video use to get a recommendation for the next show to watch. That's very different than my visit to One Medical to see my primary care physician and have them tell me what treatment course to follow based on people with similar circumstances and the AI use case in medical. So obviously a risk-based approach is very important and taking account of those different uses. For Amazon, this is enormously complicated because you have so many different use cases for AI. And as you and your team travel the world and talk to different jurisdictions, some of which are farther ahead than others. Europe is moving forward on the AI Act. Here in the US, we're still talking about what might happen at the federal level. Are there some guardrails? Are there some regulations that Amazon says to decision makers, that's okay, that's something that we support?
Yeah, and we've been very vocal about supporting risk-based regulatory approaches. We've supported the White House voluntary AI commitments. We were at the UK Safety Summit, and we've supported the outputs of those. Likewise, the G7 effort in Tokyo, and which will continue. So what's maybe an encouraging aspect of the fact that this is all so new and that everybody's sort of noticing it all at once is that we have this opportunity to build some consensus about what are the use cases that really we should be concerned about, and how can we sort of work backwards from those use cases, which we all agree are bad, the risks are bad, to build the right regulatory guardrails and voluntary best practices that will prevent the harms that we're all concerned might happen. But I tell people I'm bad at abstraction. I'm not, you need to spell out like what is the use case that you're worried about? What's the bad thing you're trying to stop? And I think one of the sort of flip sides of being so broad is that we can cite a lot of it. You can cite both of the examples you used as one that you should be concerned about and one that maybe you shouldn't be so concerned about. Obviously, anytime you're using this type of technology to make decisions about health and safety or civil rights or things that could profoundly change someone's life, you have to move very carefully and make sure you are using it with the utmost responsibility, safety, security. And so the problem is, as I sort of alluded to before, we don't know what all those things are going to be yet. Because they haven't been developed and released, and it's a particularly fraught exercise to start regulating something you don't really understand and doesn't really exist yet, because you could really shut off some potentially very favorable uses of the technology that could save lives or make people's lives much better. So it's a balance, and I think, as I said, the good news is I think there's sort of a burgeoning set of consensus in the UK, in the US, in some other countries where we can work together. And I think the key is, and this is where you guys are an incredible ally, is to educate and to collaborate with lawmakers and policymakers so that we can help them understand the policy, the technology, and we can talk together about what the risks and use cases are that we should be concerned about.
And of those two use cases that I mentioned, One Medical really is my primary care physician. I didn't make that up. And you should all be watching Mr. and Mrs. Smith. If the algorithm hasn't recommended it to you, it's fantastic.
It's on my list.
It's fantastic. You mentioned the importance of making that connection for policymakers between what the business is trying to do and the impact of the public policy decisions on that business. I want to ask you, as a business leader who has a seat at the table of the business decisions that are made at Amazon, How do you, and this will be a helpful practice tip for all of us, how do you make that case when you're sitting down with members of Congress or the Parliament in Europe or wherever around, because I know you have a global remit, so you travel around the world talking to policymakers. How do you make that connection, help them understand, well, here are the things that Amazon is trying to do to the benefit of our customers, and here's what the decision that you're contemplating making is going to do to our ability to deploy that service. How do you make that connection? Because, as you mentioned, nobody really likes abstractions, and some of these are kind of hypothetical abstractions. You're trying to tell policymakers that the decisions they make are going to impact their constituents' access to these great technologies. How do you make that case?
You have to make it real. And as I said, I'm not good at abstraction anyway, so I think you have to come up with those real use cases. And I'll give you an example that I didn't actually expect to talk about today, but I think it's a pretty powerful one. When Ukraine was first invaded, we were able to work with the Ukraine government to essentially quickly copy their government records, their real estate records, get them out of the country on what we call snowballs, which are physical memory devices, and upload them to the cloud and give them ongoing access to their own government records in the cloud weeks before the facility where those records were stored was bombed. And so under certain versions of what they call the EU cloud scheme, EUCS, there are versions of that would have prohibited companies that aren't a certain percentage owned by EU entities from even carrying government workloads because of what we would say are more protectionist reasons. And what I was able to tell many policymakers was, if this version of that law gets passed, we can't help Ukraine. That we're just not allowed to. And so that's what you break. When you look at legislation like this and you consider a solution that may harm, and maybe that goes over one way in France. It goes over another way in Finland, which has this 1,000-mile border with with Russia. So you need to find those real world examples and talk them through.
That EUCS provision you're talking about is definitely on our priority list. The idea that the security of a cloud service should be determined by the geographic location of the corporate headquarters of the provider is not one that makes much sense.
Right.
So
particularly when
we're
all
fighting against that.
We're all NATO. We're all NATO allies. If we can't, we already share the most sensitive geopolitical and military data that you can have. It's a little crazy to have legislators in one country or the other rail about the insecurity of data if it's not owned by a EU headquartered company.
Yep, not a good measure, not a good proposal. Looking ahead, we're now 6 weeks into 2024. How's the rest of the year looking for you? What's on the roadmap? Any moonshots? Although you have Project Kuiper, so I guess moonshot isn't really a hypothetical necessarily.
We're not going to the moon.
Okay.
But,
what's on the roadmap that we should be thinking about for 2024?
Well, we're encouraged by how we made it through 2023 and 2022. Some very challenging economic headwinds for our business and for every business for a couple of years there, and so we feel like we've sort of addressed our cost structure and the direction of our business. We've also done things like regionalized our logistics network so that we can deliver to customers with products that are closer to them, and which gets it to them faster, cheaper, and more sustainably. And so that work is still underway, and that's very exciting. When I'm asked that question about what kind of opportunity is left at Amazon by people at Amazon, I always have to remind them, well, look, post-pandemic even, the percentage of online shopping that makes up retail is still less than 20%. Depending on who you believe, it might be back down to 15%, but it's going to rise over time. And the percentage of the Earth's computing capacity, the computing resources, only about 5% or so is in the cloud. And so just on those businesses, there's a ton of potential to continue growing and a very high ceiling on how many more customers we can serve. And when you translate that into our stores business, there's areas like grocery that we're investing in, pharmacy that are just starting their journey. And so that's exciting. And then when you get out of those two more established businesses, you look at things like Kuiper, which is our project to launch 3,200 plus low Earth orbit satellites, so that we can provide a worldwide broadband service to, especially focused on rural communities who don't have access to broadband. We're very excited about that. We had our sort of prototype test in October, where we set 2 satellites up, and they worked like better than anybody even expected they would work. All of the tests were nominal, and the first the first order was placed using those 2 satellites, as well as video conferencing. So that's very exciting. We're going to we go into production on those satellites first half of 24, and we'll be doing a lot of launches between now and over the next few years. We have this company called Zoox, which I am incredibly optimistic about. It is. We bought it a few years ago, and it's led by some visionary people who are pioneering a purpose-built electric vehicle that will be autonomous and provide an autonomous taxi service in cities. And so there are moonshots. There's obviously, we've only scratched the surface with One Medical. We think there's a lot of innovation to do that we can do in the healthcare space, working with One Medical. So there's, as usual at Amazon, there's a lot of seeds and there's a lot of investments. But I have never been more optimistic about the future.
That's great. Last question in the 30 seconds we have left together. What do you need from ITI? What does the industry need from ITI as we address all of these policy challenges and want to let every innovation bloom?
Well, first of all, I have to thank ITI, because what we need from you and what you provide is another voice working closely with policymakers and with communities that we don't get to always touch, to explain, to help that educational process about what technology does, how we think about it, how we can regulate without inhibiting innovation. And so that is a hugely important part of making progress from a policy space. And you guys are a hugely important partner to us, and want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your partnership, appreciate your being with us here on stage today, and please join me in thanking David Sapolsky.
Thank you.
Please welcome Courtney Lang, Vice President of Policy at ITI, with Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren.
Well, thank you, Congresswoman, for joining us today at the Intersect, and thank you to everyone for being here. For those of you that don't know, Congresswoman Lofgren represents the 18th District of California, is the ranking member on the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee, and is also a senior member of the House Judiciary Committee. So really glad to have you here today. I have to say I'm happy to be sitting in this seat since I recently testified in front of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, yes. And I have to say it's nice to be giving the questions as opposed to receiving them. So with that, let's get right into it. And I wanted to start with an area that I know you have been focusing on quite a lot lately. And maybe that's an area that, in the AI kind of era that we're living in hasn't been talked about as much. But I really wanted to start with hearing your perspective on, as we're looking at other emerging technology areas, one of the things you've been looking at is quantum, and why it's so important that the US is prioritizing quantum computing and information science, and what you've been thinking about and looking at in that space.
Well, the Science Committee has taken the lead on this issue. We took the lead in the 2018 on the quantum initiative that I think has yielded the results we had hoped for in terms of research and supporting efforts in the scientific world. One of the great things about serving on the Science Committee as compared to the Judiciary Committee is that we are very bipartisan. The chairman, Frank Lucas, he's a conservative Republican. I'm not. But that does not keep us from working together because he wants to get something done, and so do I. So we are working on the reauthorization of the quantum initiative. We are about to begin a four-corners discussion with the Senate because we want to make sure that we're touching all the bases, Democrats and Republicans, House and Senate, in that endeavor. Obviously, quantum computing is not quite there yet, although we are making tremendous strides, especially with the hybrids. But it's not just computing, it's also sensing and other uses of the technology, and I do think it's important that we maintain our competitive edge there. When you think about all of the things that are happening, sometimes I feel we're just like on the doorstep. AI, quantum, fusion, and you put the three together, and if we don't make some serious missteps in the next few years, our future is very bright on this planet if we continue the steps forward that we are trying to promote in the Science Committee.
Yeah, thank you. And so you mentioned your National Quantum Reauthorization Act, which ITI was certainly proud to support, and I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit more about what that would do for the U.S. quantum capabilities and kind of how that would help to bolster those capabilities and maintain that competitive edge.
Well, we are trying to move beyond the purely scientific into some of the applied. We are expanding. NASA is a player, but they were always excluded from this, so we are including them. And we also want to make sure that U.S. scientists have the resources necessary, which is a big problem. I love the private sector, I love our private sector companies, but it's important that the scientists and the academic researchers all also have access so that they can make progress. That's an issue not just in quantum, but also in AI. And as a matter of fact, we had a hearing just yesterday on that subject.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, actually, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about this in the context of AI in particular, and certainly we know that the National Science Foundation, we heard from Tessa Blanc-Knowles earlier, discuss their efforts on the pilot program for the National AI Research Resource, which I think is certainly going to be one important mechanism by which to advance some of these research and development activities, as well as kind of give access more broadly. And we've been very supportive of the NAIR mission, as well as kind of the legislative efforts like the Create AI Act to really do that. And so, I'm wondering if you can share your thoughts on how we can really make sure that there are federal resources available for something like the NAIR, or for the NAIR to really succeed in its mission moving forward.
Well, as I say, we had an excellent hearing in the Science Committee on NAIR, and we invited some non-members who are very interested in this. Anna Eshoo, who's got a bill with me on AI, as well as Don Beyer, who has had a great interest in this. It's a resource issue in large part, as well as a workforce issue, and the two are related. As I said, we have, the barrier for entry is very high in terms of computing power. Talking to one of the leaders in OpenAI, expressed skepticism that we would ever be able to provide the resources necessary to catch up. I hope that's not the case, because much as I love the private sector, AI should not be owned by 3 companies in the United States. It should also be accessible to the academic community and to researchers and to scientists. It should not, and to startups for that matter. So I think this is an inflection point on whether we are going to provide the resources and then also the outreach for AI, and the same would go for quantum. One of the questions I had for our witness from Oak Ridge, her testimony was how useful AI was going to be in understanding plasma and fusion. And I think that's a very important question. And yet, 2 weeks ago, I was up in Seattle visiting some very forward-thinking fusion companies, and clearly they had no idea that this resource was available to them. And even had they known, the resources are so constrained, they wouldn't necessarily have been able to take advantage. So that's a real big problem, and I hope that on a bipartisan basis, we can not only authorize that, and I think we will, but get the appropriations necessary to make it really meaningful. Right now, the limitations that we're seeing in the appropriations process, which is completely dysfunctional at this point, alarm me about how much progress we're really going to make in AI as well as quantum, not to mention the fusion program.
Yeah, well, we certainly hope to see that moving forward. As you mentioned, I think this resource is going to be really integral to innovation and to democratizing access, as you note, and really making sure that multiple players in the ecosystem are able to harness this resource. So, we'll hope that those efforts are successful moving forward. I guess sticking on the topic of AI, which I'm sure will surprise nobody, it is a big topic of conversation right now. And I think it's important to remember, right, that the Science Committee has been doing work on AI for over a decade now. It's something that you all have been looking into for quite some time. But certainly as the conversation progresses and as we move to a place where there is, different thoughts about how to best regulate and oversee the technology, I'm curious if you can share some initial perspectives about how you and how your colleagues are thinking about oversight and regulation of the technology and some of the areas that you all are prioritizing as you're kind of thinking through, what the right way to approach governance of this technology is.
Well, we tasked NIST a number of years ago with laying out, first doing a collaborative process and then laying out a non-regulatory framework for AI. And I think they did a pretty good job of that. Obviously, in the end, I believe we're going to need some regulations. That's not NIST's job, but I think they've laid a foundation for how we might proceed. There are disagreements on approaches. For example, should this be risk-based and sector by sector? Or do you create one giant agency to try and do the whole thing? I think the latter approach is bound to fail because it's impossible for one agency to be an expert in every single thing. But we haven't reached a conclusion on that. I think it's important that we know what we're doing before we do it. And so we have had a number of hearings in the Science Committee. We've had some bipartisan informal briefings so that we are better educated before we go lumbering off. One of the issues, and this is also a Judiciary Committee issue, is the role of intellectual property and AI. And I think there are a lot of questions about that, both in terms of the ingestion of data and also the product of AI and its connection with intellectual property. The Registrar of Copyrights is actually engaging in some investigation on that right now. I don't think in the end she will be the definitive voice on it. The courts are likely to beat us to it. But I think what she is doing is helpful. And one of the things that she established, and I think it's correct, is that if a creative product has to be created by a human. You can't copyright something that does not have a human touch. Now, there's going to be a line. Where is that line? She's going to work on that. I think the issue of ingestion is before the court right now. People are discussing whether 230 applies to this. I don't think 230 has any application to AI whatsoever. The whole theory of 230 was to protect free speech, and it's not an issue for AI. So I think the real issue is what is owed to humankind for the data that's been ingested, and also what kind of transparency is there going to be on data ingestion. And one of the things that we're looking at in our AI discussions is greater transparency and better access to high quality data so that AI could be improved, not just generative AI, but other aspects. Where we have a lot of opportunities. I mean, people are afraid of misinformation. That's valid. People are afraid of fakes. I mean, there was recently, I guess, a deep fake with Taylor Swift, and President Biden's voice was used as a fake. All of that is worthy of concern. On the other hand, the use of AI is going to make, well, let's just think about what Google did. You know, you would have a PhD student unfolding a single protein in the human body. You could write a thesis on that. Google unfolded all of them in 2 weeks, posted them for everyone to have. It's going to charge the development of medicine and other medical advances tremendously. I mean, there are all kinds of wonderful opportunities that we need to keep in mind, because there's a number of people in Capitol Hill whose hair is on fire and the sky is falling, and I think that's the wrong approach as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective. I think it's important that we're, recognizing how transformative and innovative the technology can be, while of course recognizing that there are also risks associated with it. And I think transparency is something that we at ITI have been doing a lot of thinking about. We put out principles a couple of years ago on that. So certainly welcome, your guys' focus on that, as well as some of the other challenging issues. Copyright has also come up in a couple of conversations today.
I would guess, Congress is, especially now, not that great as legislating. I mean, we specialize in failing. So the chances are in the near term, other than what the Science Committee is going to produce, which is not the big regulatory scheme that everyone is talking about, it's the private sector efforts that is in the near term that is going to be addressing these issues. Adobe is coming up with a tagging system for fakes that I think is very promising. Others are also looking at that. So I think, we may see some real advances. It's not going to eliminate the need for regulation, but I think the private sector is going to carry us a little bit farther, and also bad actors will tell us more of what we need to be worried about while Congress continues to be dysfunctional.
Sure, that makes sense. And I think, with regard to a lot of the industry-led work, there is quite a lot going on already that folks are thinking about, including that effort that you just referenced. I think, one other area that I wanted to ask you about is certainly you mentioned the Science Committee's role in pushing this to develop the NIST AI risk management framework, and that has been really a foundational framework for organizations seeking to think through, how do they manage AI risks throughout their life cycle. But given kind of where you sit, I was curious if you could speak a little bit more to, the role that international standards play and standards in general play in advancing this conversation on AI risk management, and how that really ties into some of the overarching work that folks are doing, either, in the actual standards development space, in implementing some of the AI executive order tasks, or otherwise.
Well, I think, the standard setting is very important, and I want to credit NIST for giving us a big step forward in that regard. I mean, we're not where we need to be. But if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist, right? And we also need to work with the developed world on international standards. I am skeptical that we will be successful with some of our developed countries. China tends to go off on its own, and I'm concerned that the EU may be going off in a direction that may not end up being that positive. But I think if the United States can take the lead in standard setting, even if it's voluntary standard setting at this point, that will help put some order into this thing. And I think the Science Committee, as I say, may play a role in that. We have some excellent scientists and technicians, both in the private sector, but also in government. And I want to call out NIST once again for the excellent work they did, pulling people together. So we have an opportunity to lead, and I think it would be a mistake not to do that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Standards are absolutely going to be super important. So again, appreciate all that you've done to really push that forward. I think with that, we're nearing the end of our time. So really appreciate your joining us today at the Intersect, and we'll look forward to continuing to work with you moving forward.
Thank you. I look forward to it, and I look forward to more work with the last bipartisan committee on Capitol Hill, the Science Committee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joining us now, Gordon Bitko, Executive Vice President of Policy at ITI, Brian Peretti, Deputy Chief AI Officer and Director, Domestic and International Cyber Policy at the U.S. Department of the Treasury, Helena Fu, Director, Office of Critical and Emerging Technology at the U.S. Department of Energy, and Brian Reed, Deputy Chief Technology Officer at the FBI.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today at the Intersect. Brian and Helena, it's great to have you here today. We just heard from Congresswoman Lofgren, and throughout the day, if you were at lunch, a lot to talk about the importance of AI. Director Locasio speaking about the risk management framework. And Congresswoman Lofgren just said we're at an inflection point for AI. If we're at an inflection point, it's because of the brass tacks of the real work that agencies are going to have to do to implement AI. And of course, they're doing that because of the AI executive order and the guidance, draft guidance right now from the White House to agencies that, by my count, spells out over 200 different things that agencies are going to be responsible for. That covers such a wide range. It covers thinking about risk and thinking about how agencies are going to manage risk, and not just for themselves, but for the entities that they're responsible for, the industry sectors. It covers workforce and how are you going to build capacity. It covers how are they going to govern and manage AI products and systems themselves and within the ecosystems that they exist. That's a lot. And so one of the first questions that we all have in ITI and elsewhere is how are government agencies going to actually go about doing that? And so, Helena, I'd really like to start with you, thinking about, from your perspective, how are you prioritizing that, especially when you look at, we just saw the agencies were submitting their initial inventories of AI. And the Department of Energy submitted hundreds of really cool projects, right? There's all sorts of things about the environment and energy, awesome things. How are you thinking about balancing all that?
That's a great question. We have a huge responsibility to really deliver, both in terms of promoting innovation. That's one big section of the executive order around how we're going to train workforce, how we're going to develop tools useful, such as foundation tools, foundation models for science, energy, and security. We also have a big responsibility working with NIST and other members of the interagency on safety and security. So this is providing test beds for safe and secure AI, red teaming, model evaluations. And we were really pleased just last week to have been able to submit to DHS our assessment as a sector risk management agency of the potential risks that AI poses to the electricity grid.
Yeah, that's a really great point there at the end, because of course none of you as departments are in a vacuum. You've got entities that you're responsible for. And Brian, I know the same thing for Treasury with the financial services sector. The EO explicitly calls out the expectation that you're going to do that work. So hopefully you can share with us a little bit about how that's going.
Yeah, so as part of the executive order, we were assigned the secretary within 150 days to produce a report on the cybersecurity aspects of AI for the financial sector. And we really did this as part of a continuation of an effort we published about a year ago on cloud and how that impacts the financial sector. So we did that same model again. We started to talk to a bunch of different firms, both financial firms, AI providers, other folks in the space that really kind of understand how AI is being used within the financial sector. What are a lot of the risks, what are a lot of our opportunities, and how do we kind of think about this space going forward. I think some of the key conclusions we have, of course, they're not finalized yet, but AI has been something that's been used in the financial sector for many years. We heard one firm's been using it maybe up to 50 years, and then we also heard some other small firms that we're just starting to think about it, right? So these kind of models are something that's always helpful within firms to understand the risks they're having and how they can kind of address that. But AI really fits in that risk governance model they already have. They don't see it as a large change from what it is. It's just another risk of many that they have. We always look back to this cybersecurity framework, right? Your biggest challenge is always to identify how do we make sure we're thinking about this, understanding where it may fit within our ecosystem, and what that means going forward. So, as we're looking at this and continue the conversation to understand What's the use cases that are being done in it? What are the challenges doing that? Should we be working with industry to develop tools or techniques that may help them harness the energy better, prevent bad things from happening and going off the rails? How do we work with all that together? And I think that public-private partnership and that engagement strategy has been really helpful. And I think that's why we're really excited to be here, really to listen to other folks, right? The speakers here, the people in the audience, to understand what your risks and challenges are. How can we build that through? And this organization has always been something we've always looked to think about good thought leadership. So when you have comments and thoughts, please pass them on. I know they'll get to all of us here as we're trying to do our job and develop policy to address the challenges.
Thanks, Brian. I do want to come back to the governance points that you were raising there, but before we do that, Brian, of course, it's not only in the sector risk management agencies, but there's a national security and law enforcement implication here as well. And a lot of what's in the guidance from the White House is about managing those risks to individuals and to property and so on. So I know the FBI has been doing a lot of work in that regard for a while. Hopefully you can give us some of the latest on that.
Certainly. So the FBI has a robust AI and AI ethics, program. I'd like to maybe highlight two activities that we performed in support of demonstrating our activities under Executive Order 13960 that have, again, shown value in the pivot towards EO 14110. The first activity is mapping risk to mitigation, right? And of course, a strong read of the AI risk management framework was warranted there. And prior to that, we did a full-on literature review on ethics and implementation frameworks. We grouped the risks and found and connected them to internal processes and technological controls that we could apply. A concrete example of a process control that we've identified is probably a common one, right? And that's the FBI must ensure that our employees are properly trained and have the proper agency to assume the overall consequences of any decision that's made with an AI aid or a algorithmic tool. And so with that initial mapping as prerequisite, we then began building out an AI ethics council. This is patterned after an institutional review board that you might find in medical experimentations. And we took great pains to ensure that the composition and the expertise on that board reflects the Bureau widely and the American population. The AI Ethics Council is complementary to the risk profile that we've identified, in that every use case is evaluated on the merits of its risk and mitigation, but the AI Ethics Council also allows us a forum to dive deeper into the nuances of AI. This is explicitly where we can get into conversations about undesirable risk and areas where AI may fail in novel ways that traditional information technology systems do not. And I feel that these two activities, in concert with the totality of FBI's AI response and governance models, have been hugely successful. They've been implemented by FBI employees and subject matter experts, but I attribute a lot of that success to the conversations that we've been having with our fellow government peers, academia, and the industry more broadly, and very explicitly forums like this we find ourselves today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. I think that a lot of what you said really ties back to Brian, to your points about the importance of governance, having an ethics council and having risk profiles. One of the questions that I've got for you, though, Brian, is how do you balance that with this desire for innovation for the mission people, and you have mission responsibility too, to move forward as fast as possible, to not want to wait and to say this technology is going to help us catch a bad guy or solve a financial crime or fix a climate and sustainability challenge tomorrow. We can't wait for the governance process. So how are you balancing those tensions?
Yeah, I think this is pretty exciting, as we're going really building out a new field here. I mean, I've been now the Deputy Chief AI Officer for about a week. I think you've been about a couple, maybe a little longer than that as the AI Officer. And if you saw the New York Times this weekend, the hottest job in all of across is the new Chief AI Officer, which means there's going to be a lot of new people showing up in this space who have not been trained in it because there's no training yet on what a Chief AI Officer is. I think that's going to be really interesting to figure out how we build these components out, right? With the ability to be able to understand the technology you're working on, understanding the mission that we're looking for, and then being able to make sure we tie it all together with the ethical issues and other challenges that we have as the organization tries to deliver on its mission. So you have to not slow it down, but still build in the right efforts going forward. And this also goes into the whole education and hiring effort. I saw today, I think DHS has 50 people who they're looking for in AI. I'm not sure how many within Treasury we're going to be hiring, but there's just not a lot of folks out there. How do you make sure you're building in the right folks with the right skills to be able to address that? But part of this is that how do we not allow this to get out of control in a way that's not helpful, right? That AI and other things can always go in a direction may not been originally intended to. But that's where that governance comes into. But then also, how do we make sure, Treasury is a pretty big organization, how do we make sure all the different components within Treasury are aligned, trying to achieve the same effort with cost efficiency, so we don't have, I think we have like 13 different bureaus that they're all not developing their own AI model and then never coordinating, so we're doing 13 times spend without the benefits we're getting for it. So understanding how to coordinate this is going to be really huge. And then how do we also work with our brethren in other departments and agencies like Energy, FBI, and the like to understand how they're looking at it so we can align resources even better. And then working with the trades and other folks like the folks here today to really understand that. How are you looking at it? How are we taking best practices and really, I wouldn't say steal best practices, but incorporate those best practices into what we're doing to be able to make sure we're doing this the right way, right? Governance is hard, it's difficult, nobody necessarily likes it, but if it's done correctly, the benefit for the organization is huge. And we know OMB has a draft memo out there. You may have already commented on it. If not, please do. It's still open, but trying to make sure we're setting it up the right way. A lot of headaches, I think, for us in these positions, but the good kind of headaches, because hopefully we build it out the right way, a sustainable effort, so that makes the organization run better than would otherwise.
Yeah, we did provide comments. I'm sure many of you in the audience helped contribute to that. The guidance, there's lots of questions about intellectual property and ownership and how the government is going to acquire and manage all that. And that certainly is an active area where I know everybody here is interested. So if I could just follow up on that a little bit, Brian, and sorry to pick on your follow-up there, but the question I think will be from many of ITI's members and others in the public, how do we provide continuous and real-time feedback, not just a one-time, here's some comments, because the field is moving so quickly, technology is changing so quickly. How do we ensure that there's really good connectivity?
I guess one, invite us back for more of these meetings, right? When you have efforts, when you have meetings, when everybody in the audience have meetings, don't hesitate to reach out to us, right? Part of our effort, part of my office's effort for the last 22 years I've been there, has really been that public-private partnership, that engagement model to make sure we're hearing what the sector, in my case, the financial sector, is doing. But we're highly dependent upon many other sectors. Energy is something, you can't run a bank without power. It just doesn't work that way. So how do we make sure we're engaged with those in those other efforts to be able to make sure we're connected? So don't hesitate to invite us to meetings. Send us comments. You'll have my email address after this. Please never hesitate to flood me with things to read. We love to read and learn. We love to question back to understand what's the right way to do. Once again, this office is going to be new. It's new in most places. Hopefully some of you already have AI officers out there who we can start to engage with. What are your best practices? What did you do wrong that we can learn from so I don't do the same mistake? What do you do right to be able to make my job even easier to get to that end state faster? Right? This dialogue is going to be critical, and ITI is critical to that, to be able to make sure we're learning and understanding is the best way. So oversharing is good in this space to understand what's going on. Hopefully it's not created by AI, right? It's actually based upon your lessons and what you've learned overall. But whatever we can do to get to a better spot is huge from our side, because it's going to be a team effort, right? This is not something where every sector does it individually, that every AI officer has to do it individually. We have to figure out how to do it best to get those economies of scale to build through to get to the right spot.
Just so everybody knows, I did not prompt Brian to say, come to ITI with feedback. That was
Please do, anyone.
totally unsolicited,
Yeah.
but we certainly appreciate that and look forward to taking you up on that.
Yeah.
One of the questions I think that prompts, and I'll go to the other Brian and then Helena for thoughts on this, is you are all sort of one-person armies at the moment, right? And there's a huge workforce implication to this and a prioritization question here. The executive order and the memo talk a lot about plans to build capacity, but it's very early days. So how are you thinking about expanding the workforce and bringing in more people who don't just read an article about ChatGPT or generative AI and think that they're experts? What are you actually doing in the agency, Brian, to try to address some of those challenges?
Right, so we have a number of programs to increase digital acumen or data acumen, workforce upskilling. I am in particular a recipient of our University Education Fund, where I'm able to go to school part-time. These types of opportunities really need to be fully explored in a more wholesome and comprehensive manner. I know there's a number of processes and initiatives being kicked off. I recall even back to the 2021 NSC Commission on AI, the final report, which really drove home the need for a wholesome federal response in this space. But I'm really hopeful that we're going to find some capacity in the near future.
Yeah, Helena, same question for you. I know we were talking outside and you said your whole office is you and two fellows at the moment. So, well, but maybe Congresswoman Lofgren or Senator Blackburn will hear that and realize that some appropriations are in order for helping to address these. But what are you doing today? That's not a tenable solution long term, obviously.
So I will say that at DOE, I'm really fortunate to work with a whole slew of technical experts across all of our programs. And of course, the over 50,000 scientists, engineers, technologists who are at our national labs, who are truly a resource for the nation. They're not all AI experts, but I don't think they need to be. We need the sort of multidisciplinary scientific approach to many of these problem sets that we haven't fully envisioned yet. We do have a tasking within the executive order to train 500 new researchers by 2025. We are looking at building programs, expanding programs that our labs already have with the communities and with the academic institutions in their areas and seeing how we can ramp that up more. One thing I would just add, though, to all of this is, I think at DOE, because energy is in our name, people often associate us with clean energy specifically and climate. That's a huge, huge part of our mission. But I think the thing that I would really like to just share is that we have so much enabling infrastructure to solve the AI problems of today and also of the future, both from the computing that we have. We have the world's fastest supercomputer that's publicly benchmarked. That's also second most energy efficient, because it's something that we try to couple really closely through our various industry partnerships. So that compute, coupled with the scientific user facilities that we have all across the country that generate troves and troves of high quality scientific data, I think this is a resource that we should be able to use in aid of the nation.
Yeah, so if I can just, Helena, follow up on that point. How does industry find out about all that, right? There's lots of those things out there. Representative Lofgren was just talking about she visited some companies up in Seattle who had no idea about what Oak Ridge is doing, but they're in the fusion space.
Yes.
So what do we do collectively to close that gap?
So I feel like it's my personal responsibility to be elevating our capabilities that can be leveraged by other agencies that are being leveraged for the greater community. Fusion, AI, quantum. I heard her talk about those three. DOE is very, very deep interests in all three of these areas, and the energy efficiency that will need to underpin a lot of this future work. So in terms of how do people find out about it, we are also tasked within the EO to develop partnerships with industry, with academia, to build some of these tools, to leverage our computing facilities, to be able to push the frontiers of this field further?
Yeah, I'm sure people here would have lots of interest in helping to do that. I remember when I was in the government, people from Oak Ridge used to have to come sell to individual agencies, hey, we've got a really cool supercomputer here. Do you guys have any uses for it? That doesn't seem like the most efficient solution, right? And I know there's got to be better ways. Brian, I'd like to ask you, the same question. You're doing this external-facing research right now and making a report, but what can industry be doing to find out what's going on in Treasury and engaging with it in a more proactive way?
Sure. So, I mean, we have the public-private partnership, right? That's been around for 20 plus years now to be able to engage. So we always encourage every financial institution to engage with that, to work through that partnership model, to be able to understand what the challenges are, what they're seeing, what the unique solutions they may have to be able to help. I mean, it's set up for that reason, really, to be this flexible environment to be able to do that. What we also do is encourage, if there's some issue out there, let us know. You can always call us directly to let us know what those things are, what those challenges are, what use cases you're finding that are beneficial, right? As we're doing our outreach to do our 150-day report, that's really what we've been doing, a listening tour, to be able to get best information from folks within the sector to understand those challenges, but then also AI providers and the like. But what we have to keep doing is listening more, right? The solutions are going to come out as we just talk to enough people. How do we make that environment in which people feel comfortable having that discussion? Well, that's part of our real goal here. Make sure people are comfortable coming in. So the report we did on cloud, we didn't cite anybody within it. We listed who we did interviews with, but we didn't cite anybody's name because we heard a lot of negative things that they had to address, challenges we had to tackle, and work streams we had to develop, right? That's our goal here, is to really make that safe environment, to be able to share best information. And one thing just to ask generally, right? I have to train up my staff. I have to get smarter on this too, right? We ask for best papers out there, things that you find that are helpful, that you use within your day to be able to make sure you understand this. So we get smarter on that stuff, right? Some are highly scientific papers, some are blog posts. But whatever those are, the more conversations we can have, identifying those things that help us get smart across the board is going to be helpful. I don't have time necessarily to go through every scientific publication, but I know a lot of people here in this crowd, I bet you, are reading stuff and say, this is much better than this other one. Send that over to ITI, to us, to be able to say, here's something we found that's helpful, so that we start that conversation, right? And the more we can build that in and use you as a sounding board to get to us the right information, and we have that dialogue, hopefully we're going to be in a better spot. Right, we'll have next year with this conference, hopefully we get all invited back, and we'll be able to say, yeah, this is what we learned over the last year. Is this the right stuff? Is this the challenges you're seeing? Are these the things we're supposed to be focused on? And then be able to have that conversation. Hopefully it's more than once a year, but to have that conversation over and over again. Here's how industry is developing. Here's how I'm using it. Here are the things that are helpful. Here's where you need some more skills. Here's where you're pretty well skilled up. Right? That feedback is what's going to be really critical, because we can't do it all ourselves. This is an emerging field, right? There's not much out there, if you think about it, compared to many other risks we face. How do we get in this spot, right? And how do we use the opportunities to really get better, right? That's where hopefully we'll be in the right spot. So,
thanks, Brian. We've only got a few seconds left, but one of the questions that all begs, and it's great to hear that, and if you are going to disclose report results next year, you're more than welcome to come back and do that here. But one of the challenges for us and for member companies and for industry is Treasury has their approach for that engagement and outreach, and Energy has their approach, and FBI and DOJ has their approach. So, Helena, just in a few seconds, how do you think industry should be thinking about interacting across all those agencies as well?
Well, certainly associations are one way, but I think as Brian mentioned, our doors are open. So if there are things that you want to be talking about, things that we should be considering, very much happy to we're all ears.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, you heard it there. Helena will leave her phone number and email address on the way out, and feel free to contact her. All right, thank you all very much. I think we're out of time, so we'll yield the stage to the next panel.
Please welcome Rob Strayer. ITI's Executive Vice President of Policy, for a discussion with Senator Marsha Blackburn.
I'm honored to be joined here on the stage with Senator Marsha Blackburn, who represents the state of Tennessee. She is on a powerhouse set of committees in the Senate, including the Finance Committee, the Commerce Committee, the Judiciary Committee, and the Veterans Affairs Committee.
Yes.
I had the opportunity to testify before the Commerce Committee Subcommittee on Consumer Protection that's led by Senator Blackburn and Senator Hickenlooper. That day in September, we talked about how to increase transparency in artificial intelligence systems. Senator Blackburn has really been a leader in pro-innovation policy for all technology, and in particular for artificial intelligence and for quantum computing. I want to start there with AI. There's been vigorous activity on the Hill. There's been a series of AI insights, discussions, and the two committees in particular that you serve on have done a lot of due diligence in the area of artificial intelligence. So based on those discussions that you've had, at this point, what do you think it is that Congress can do to promote a pro-innovation artificial intelligence agenda for the United States so it continues to lead the world?
And that's exactly what we should be doing, is realizing that Congress will create the environment for jobs growth and innovation to take place. And we need to be certain that we do not legislate to a technology, but focus more on the utilization and end use of that technology. So that's the mindset that we should go into this with. And I've been so pleased that we have been able to have some hearings. Judiciary Committee's been very active, as has Commerce Committee. We even had a Veterans Affairs hearing on the utilization of AI and what it could do. And of course, Rob, as you know, representing Tennessee, I like to say we have a relationship with the good, the bad, the ugly when it comes to AI. Our healthcare, our logistics, our manufacturing, all utilize it and do great things. And then you look at entertainment, and that's where we have issues around name, image, and likeness. So my hope is we focus on the environment, we put the guardrails in place, and that we realize if we are not allowing innovation, China is. And so it's important for us to have that take place.
Yeah, that's very sensible. You know, at ITI, we talk about having a tech-neutral framework
Yes.
that can be applied across all of these technologies of the future.
That's right.
I know you just touched on these many industries in Tennessee that will benefit. Tennessee's a leader in transportation, in healthcare for many years, increasingly in telecommunications, and of course those wonderful artists that do both the performing and the songwriting in Tennessee will certainly be able to use artificial intelligence. I want to bring you to another technology that we've just touched on briefly in the program today, and that is quantum information sciences and quantum computing. I know that Oak Ridge National Lab is a leader in that
Yes.
area, and I know that you've taken a very keen interest in this. Could you describe a little bit what has brought you to your interest, aside from Oak Ridge, to the quantum field, and what you could see that promise being for Tennessee and down the road?
Yes, indeed. And Oak Ridge has the world's fastest computer. We like to take a little victory lap on that one and celebrate it. And what we have seen is one of our cities, Chattanooga, Tennessee, that is in close proximity to Oak Ridge, has focused on quantum. Chattanooga is a very innovative city, and they focused on broadband acceleration, broadband to the premise, fixed wireless broadband, and enabling innovators to be there. And they actually have a city quantum initiative. And I did a quantum roundtable this summer, and it was absolutely fascinating. Because of that, we've got a couple of bills that we're pushing at Commerce Committee. As you all know, the quantum initiative needs to be reauthorized. in order to move forward. And Senator Lujan and I have a quantum sandbox bill that would allow that innovation that needs to take place and be able to move from that R&D into commercialization. Look at these near-term utilizations on quantum and how we move this into commercialization, how we build these quantum systems so that there can be a more widespread commercial use. Likewise, there's a second bill that we're working on that deals with test beds and making certain that we have the test beds that are going to be, some will be in a classified setting, some will be in a commercial setting. But we want to be certain there again that we do our part on creating that wraparound and that environment so that we can keep that innovation here and allow people that are working in this space to know that there's going to be that support system that they can jump into when they're ready to elevate that technology.
And it sounds like you're really trying to be careful and very prescriptive in a narrow way to think
Correct.
about how you're making the best use of taxpayer dollars when you set up these public-private partnerships
Right.
and frameworks for innovation to make sure that technology is transferred in a smart way to the private sector, but with the private sector generally leading a lot of those initiatives for success down the road.
That's
into that
right,
commercialization.
and we want to make certain that they are doing that. You know, when we look at what is going to happen in the military space, we need to look at those partnerships carefully. We need to look at how we do security clearances to help address some of these issues. Of course, Space Force is going to be an area that is going to rely heavily not only on quantum but also on AI. And as you talk about next generation warfare and generative AI and some of the applications that can be there, be utilized. So yes, it's important for us to think forward on that.
Great. We're glad you're there doing it. We just caught you between votes, so we've got a very limited time with you
Right.
today, unfortunately. But I just want to ask one more question, if I could, and that's
Sure.
on tax policy. You sit on the Finance Committee, as I mentioned earlier. And really, investment in technology is really driven by tax policy. And tech companies, to get where they need to go in scaling up, invest more in R&D from their base revenues than any other sector of the economy. So tax policy impacts them even more than other sectors. And for the U.S. to continue to lead in tech policy, we need good tax policy. Last week, the House passed a bill that includes immediate R&D expensing and some other tax fixes. How would you prognosticate the future here on the Senate's ability to pass something in the area of tax relief this year?
Yes, we anticipate that this piece of legislation that moved from the House to the Senate will come to us at Finance Committee. And we will be able to go through an amendment process on this. Everyone agrees that making certain that we keep those R&D credits, have that bonus depreciation, that expensing, it is vitally important to do for people that are trying to innovate in this space. One of the things that I regularly remind my colleagues of is that you've got such a short window in a life cycle for many of these technology applications. So you need to be generous in allowing them these R&D credits and this expensing, immediate expensing, because they're going to be on to the next iteration. And we need to keep that. And it doesn't matter if it's quantum or AI, that structure needs to be there. And on AI, let me say this. I know some of you are focused on what is going to happen with the entertainment industry, and Senator Coons and I filed a bill with Klobuchar and Tillis joining us on it. It's called No Fakes, and it puts in place the protections for name, image, likeness, and voice when it comes to AI, to be certain we protect the creative community there. And you've got Chairman Cantwell working on some AI bills. And you'll see other components that are going to come from judiciary that will focus on protecting intellectual property so that you have the right to benefit from that work that you do. Doesn't matter if you're getting the patent or the copyright on various applications. So those are all in our bucket of bills that we're going to focus on this year.
Oh, great. Sounds like that's going to be a very active legislative agenda.
It
and
is.
Just please know that ITI and all of our member companies want to be even more engaged as new bills come about and we get closer to seeing those bills move out of committee and onto the Senate floor.
Perfect. We want to hear from you.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd love to do so. Well, as I mentioned, our time is at an end. I just want to ask the audience to join me in thanking you for being such a leader for innovation and championing American innovation, as well as joining us today. Thanks.
Thank you. It is my pleasure. Thank you all.
Joining us now, Waldo McMillan, Vice President, the Americas, Government Affairs at Cisco.
Good. I was wondering if you all were going to applaud, so thank you for that. So good afternoon. At Cisco, our purpose is to power an inclusive future for all. Technology-based solutions drive our ability to address critical challenges in communities, power hybrid work, transform infrastructure in cities, and secure the networks that run it all. To ensure these solutions can be deployed, it takes forward-thinking policies that foster innovation and emerging digital technologies. Now, for a moment, imagine a world where every home, no matter how remote, is a beacon of connectivity, where the networks that bind us serve as channels of communication, openness, and competition. Or a world where AI propels us forward and does so responsibly. Today, tools like broadband and AI emerged as foundational pillars shaping our society, economy, and governance. They are transforming the way we do things. To fulfill the enormous potential of this moment, right-sized investments and government policy in research, innovation, security, and procurement should lead the way. At the heart of this critical discourse is the Federal Communications Commission and its pivotal role in shaping policy that promotes competition, innovation, inclusion, and investment, while also ensuring transparency and accountability. Understanding that this is a space where the challenges are as significant as the opportunities, the FCC has a lot on its plate and knows that this new chapter requires more foresight, more collaboration, and most of all, a balanced approach. Now at Cisco, as we work to bridge the digital divide, as we work to ensure all Americans have access to reliable, affordable, high-speed internet service, as we work to propel the E-rate program forward to help our schools and libraries get affordable service and secure telecommunications and internet access, and as we work to cement America's global competitiveness by freeing up spectrum, fostering spectrum sharing, and accelerating research and development, the FCC has been and will continue to be a critical partner. That is why it is my distinct honor to introduce to the Intersect stage Commissioner Ana M. Gomez, a trailblazer in the U.S. telecommunications policy world. As the first Latina American FCC commissioner in over 2 decades, Commissioner Gomez has dedicated more than 30 years to international and domestic communications law and policy. including playing pivotal roles in key public sector telecommunications initiatives. Commissioner Gomez brings a deeply personal commitment to bridging the digital divide, advocating for high-speed broadband accessibility for every person in every community, regardless of geography or income. Her leadership at the federal level ranges from issues as diverse as public safety communications to international spectrum negotiations. Today, she will share her unique insights with my friend and ITI President and CEO, Jason Oxman, on the most pressing communications technology challenges facing the United States. Will you all please join me in providing a warm welcome to the Intersect stage, Commissioner Ana Gomez.
All right, thanks so much, Waldo, and thank you for teeing this up. And Commissioner Gomez, welcome to the Intersect.
Thank you.
It's such a great pleasure to have you here, and we appreciate your taking the time. You're, I'm going to say about 4 months in, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, so we'll pretend this is your first time in front of an audience of tech policy professionals. I know it's not, but we love having you here, and we appreciate your arrival at the FCC, by the way. I think saying it was eagerly anticipated might be a bit of an understatement. You filled out the commission. You're now joining a majority of 3. I want to start off because everybody here, whether they know it or not, has issues before the FCC. The work that you do there is enormously important to the entire tech ecosystem. So I want to start off by asking kind of what you thought of when you assumed this role, the role of the FCC, the role that you would play as a commissioner, kind of what your priorities are in this role. Tell us about what it's meant to you coming into this office.
Absolutely, thank you. Thank you again for having me. And I just want to point out that I've known you for almost the 30 years that I've been in this, and I'm just delighted to see how well you're doing.
Thank you.
I like to talk about my regulatory philosophy, which I'm still finessing 4 months in, so I have a bit to go. But overarchingly, I want to ensure that competition drives vibrant innovation for the good of consumers. And what does that mean? What that means is ensuring that all users in the United States are connected to high-speed broadband and that it's affordable. It means having spectrum for new and innovative services. It means ensuring that public safety has the resources that it needs in order to meet its mission, and also that consumers have access to services that make them safe as well. On the media side, it means protecting localism and making sure that we have diversity and competition in the media marketplace. And all of this, I look at through the lens of consumers, as well as a very practical lens of how is this going to be implemented. I particularly want to make sure that we take all of our actions keeping in mind how it affects historically underrepresented communities. And so that's basically in a package where I come from.
So let me ask you about a couple of issues that you mentioned within that framework. One is spectrum, another is affordable access to broadband. Both very much in the news, largely through no fault of the commission, but through some action or inaction, I guess is better to describe, by Congress. Let's start with spectrum, issues ranging from auction authority to disputes on how much broadband connectivity we should have as we await takeoff on the runway, and a lot of issues in between that. But at a high level, what are the things that you'd like the industry to be paying particularly close attention to within the spectrum debates? What's coming up at the FCC, or what should we be urging Congress to do to help make sure that that spectrum is unlocked for the best uses?
Yeah, so for decades now, there has just been this amazing thirst for spectrum, for new and innovative services, and it's not slowing down. And I'm quite cognizant of that, and the FCC is quite cognizant of that. So there's a constant search for finding ways to repurpose existing spectrum for new and innovative services. In addition, we have to think very balanced because there's a lot of different types of services that rely on spectrum, from obviously your normal mobile, particularly mobile broadband now, to satellites, science issues. I just got back from Dubai. Well, I shouldn't say just got back since it's now been a couple months, but I was there for the first week of the World Radio Communication Conference, where all of these issues were front and center. And one of the items that I thought was the most interesting items was the fact that we are looking at a framework for allocating spectrum to be used for cislunar communications as we look to both the science use of with cislunar, but also for commercialization of space and on the moon, is we need to start thinking about how are we going to allocate spectrum for these particular uses. So spectrum is a big deal, but, and I'm glad you raised the auction authority. The FCC's pioneered auctions as a way to efficiently assign spectrum licenses. And it is a much faster process than the traditional process of doing beauty contests between different license applicants. And because our authorization expired and Congress hasn't reauthorized it, there is a lot of work that the Commission right now cannot do in order to prepare for additional auction of spectrum. And every day that goes by that we don't have that spectrum auction authority, it's just going to put us further and further behind in terms of assigning new licenses for new services.
And you mentioned the importance of those auctions to licensed use of spectrum, the mobile broadband that we all rely on from a variety of different providers. There are also a lot of unlicensed use of spectrum that the Commission makes possible. So I wanted to ask you about that balance, how you're looking at the need to make sure that innovation that we all benefit from, ranging from Wi-Fi to garage door openers and baby monitors and everything in between. How do you view the Commission's role in terms of allocating the licensed and the unlicensed to make sure there's innovation taking place in both areas?
Yeah, well, I think you just answered the question yourself. We do need to find the appropriate balance. And in fact, the Commission did take action when it allocated the 6 gigahertz band, which was unprecedented to have that much spectrum allocated, contiguous spectrum, to have larger bandwidth unlicensed. And that was one of the items that we did very well with at the World Radio Communication Conference, in that we remain, the 6 gigahertz band remains for use for Wi-Fi services, which is important, not just because these services are bringing in the next generation of Wi-Fi, which needs to keep up with our wider and broader and more high bandwidth broadband itself, but also because it's so important to maintain the harmonization for equipment, for example, making it lower cost and more deployed. So very pleased with the outcome of the good work that the U.S. delegation did at the WRC.
Which is something that, obviously, since the president plucked you from one role where you were heavily involved in our international spectrum efforts to another role where you're still heavily involved in it, I'm sure that was particularly pleasing to see that work that you started there continue. You also mentioned broadband as part of your portfolio of priorities now that you're on board at the Commission. The news of this week is the potential end of a very important program that has made broadband, affordable broadband, available to address that all-important digital divide that is pervasive. Mm-hmm. I think the Commission has announced that tomorrow is actually an unfortunate milestone, mm-hmm. Should Congress not act between now and tomorrow, which I think is probably unlikely. What should we be thinking about the importance of that program and other programs that Congress may or may not move forward, and what should we be asking Congress to do to make sure we continue to address the digital divide?
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised this question, and I do hope that Congress passes the current bipartisan bills that have been dropped to provide funding to extend the program. Right now, the Affordable Connectivity Program provides support to close to 23 million households nationwide, all over the country, rural, tribal, everywhere. And these are folks that qualify under the program, and we believe we will run out of funding sometime April-ish, at which point there will be no more support for these households. I'm very concerned about it for several reasons. We want to make sure that every user is connected to the internet. It is so important for participation in society, in our economy. It's important for finding a job, applying to college, for doing homework, for doing remote school, for telehealth, for seniors. It is just it is so central to our lives now that those who cannot be connected are going to fall farther and farther behind. For me, though, I also want to make clear that there's also broader effects on the economy, because you don't know what kind of innovation you're going to bring from that one student who would not have that connection, but somehow is able to create some type of online product that becomes the next, I don't know, Google. Also, telehealth. Telehealth reduces the cost to Medicare and Medicaid by 23%. You're going to be adding, and the majority of subscribers to ACP, I believe, I hope I'm right about that, are seniors. Rural areas are very high cost to serve. And for that reason, the services tend to be higher priced, despite our universal service goals. And we need to make sure that the companies that are providing the services are able to continue to afford to provide the services. In addition, we're spending tens of billions of dollars to deploy broadband throughout every corner of America. We need to make sure that those are sustainable. Without subscribers, they won't necessarily be sustainable. So we are looking at a downstream effect of losing the support for 23 million households that could really have a significant effect on our economy.
Well, it'll be good to see Congress take some action there. As you noted, important to a lot of communities. I think close to half of the ACP program participants are military as well. So definitely important for our nation. I wanted to ask you about two other areas that are important to the tech industry that the FCC has recently stepped up activity in. One is cybersecurity and the Cyber Trust Mark. I was pleased to participate, and actually we're going to hear from Ann Neuberger a little bit later, who convened the group at the White House, the FCC empowered to move that forward. So tell me about the Cyber Trust Mark and cybersecurity efforts and how important you think those are at the Commission.
Yeah, I'm actually very excited about the Cyber Trust Mark. So the Commission has put out a notice of proposed rulemaking that would create the Cyber Trust Mark, which is in essence a logo, much like the Energy Star logo, that if a device has that logo on it, it means that it meets standards for cyber hygiene. And it would also have a QR code so that consumers could actually find out more about the manufacturer and the product itself and how secure it is. I think it could become a real competitive edge if it's adopted widely enough and if consumers actually accept it as something that's trustworthy. So I'm excited that the industry is excited about the trust mark, and I think it could be a really good public-private partnership between the FCC and manufacturers to lead to better cyber outcomes. It's a voluntary program, too. So what you want is you really want it to be market-driven and to make sure that it succeeds just through wide deployment.
Well, we look forward to helping support that program, and it is, as you said, it's a competitive differentiator for companies to use to inform consumers about the care they take with the manufacture and deployment of products. The last technology question I wanted to ask you about, not surprisingly given what we've been talking about all day, is AI. And we've seen FCC engagement with AI in the headlines this week, helping track down a robocaller who enabled AI to be used to spoof the president in a political primary. But more broadly, there's an inquiry underway on AI at the Commission. This is a new area for the Commission to focus on. What can we expect to see, and what is the role that industry can play in helping inform the process as you move forward?
So I have not seen anything as hot as AI is right now since I think right at the beginning of the internet, when you and I were baby lawyers back in the day. I think that there are several ways that we are looking at AI and both its benefits and its risks. In addition to looking at it from the perspective of how it encourages robocalls or can be used for robocalls, or how it can also be used to mitigate against robocalls and robotexts. We're also looking at it from the accessibility point of view. Already, there's a lot of good work being done with AI, for example, on speech recognition. And so the Disability Advisory Council is looking at, it has a working group on AI and the potentials and risks with AI. We're also, the chairwoman announced that she circulated, which I've already voted to approve, a declaratory ruling that artificially, faked voices using artificial intelligence are covered under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act, and therefore prohibited without prior consent. And this will help ensure that consumers aren't subject to fraud and really harassment through these terrible robocalls and robotexts. In addition, there's a lot of talk about looking at it for spectrum management. So there's a lot of good and interesting uses for artificial intelligence that I think we're going to just see develop more and more. And of course, we need to be careful about the risks and make sure that it gets used responsibly. But how industry can help, for me, I have been on a mission to educate myself as much as possible on AI because I am not an expert. I just went to a conference this weekend, and one of the professors said that professors like to say, I don't know anything about this, but. And I wanna stop having to say, I don't know anything about this, but.
That's great. Well, we look forward to helping on that educational mission, and we are so lucky that the president picked you to fill this role at the commission. Please join me in thanking FCC Commissioner Ana Gomez.
Thank you.
Please welcome Clara Shai, CEO, Salesforce AI, and Ryan Heath, Global Technology Correspondent at Axios.
Hello, everyone. Clara, everyone here has been drowning in AI hype for a year now. Both it's going to save and revolutionize the world, and it's going to destroy the world and kill us all. I don't really buy into either of those perspectives, so I wanted us to start in some of the real practical ground of like how people are actually using AI. So maybe kick us off, like of all your thousands of clients, what are some of the surprising ways and uses that you've seen of AI over the last few months?
What a fascinating time. I mean, I feel like it's 1998 for AI. And we're starting to see some early use cases, but so much of the potential and some of the risks are still to come. Mm-hmm. And it's a tremendous learning moment, I think, for everyone, regardless of whether you're in the public sector, private sector, or academia. And I think it's an exciting time. I think there's tremendous opportunity for AI to really benefit all kinds of people from around the world, and certainly in our country. And I also think that we are very fortunate to be in the pole position in America when it comes to AI. In terms of what we're seeing from customers, I mean, it's really interesting. I think every customer, enterprise customer, small businesses, we work with all kinds of companies at Salesforce. We're really hearing everyone start with the same question, which is, number one, how do I trust generative AI? Both from a data privacy and security sense, as well as an ethics sense, as well as understanding this black box of how an input generates an output. Given that AI, and generative AI in particular, it's not deterministic, it's statistical, it's stochastic, which means that the same exact prompt you put in can output something different every single time you ask it. And so that's a new paradigm for software. It's a new paradigm for technology that everyone is going to have to get used to. And so the number one question is trust. And this is also happens to be our company's number one value, is thinking about how do we engineer trust into the products, and also how do we help our customers deploy AI in a safe and secure way that respects their data privacy and security. So that's number one.
Yep.
The number two question is, I think a lot of companies maybe felt underwhelmed by some of their earlier investments in the last big trend, which is not as big as this one, but around blockchain and the metaverse. And so this time around, especially in this economic environment, every CEO is asking, what is the business case for AI? You know, running training and inference on these large language models, it can get really expensive. And so there has to be a business case in mind, whether it's driving productivity, it's increasing the sales output of the sales department, it's driving efficiency. There has to be a business case there. And then the third question, and it's a really big one, is how do we drive change? You know, especially if you're a bigger company, the more employees you have, the harder this change management exercise is.
So you mean like the people management? So
the people management.
You can buy whatever tech you want, but you also have to change people and train people and get them ready.
You can nail the trust part. You can have the best data privacy, data security policy with AI. You can have all of the business case, but then how do you retrain and reskill and upskill all of your employees? And that is a very tall order. It's the same as we went through in the 90s of how did you teach everybody in your company how to use the internet? Well, it's very difficult. It doesn't happen overnight. And it can't just be top down, nor can it just be bottom up. It has to be both, right? It has to be the company enabling a secure environment for employees to test and learn and experiment and start to really get comfortable with these technologies, just like with search and with email in the 90s. Yeah. And then it also is incumbent on individual line managers and individual employees to say, I need to learn these skills. Right? I can't do my job without learning email. I can't do my job without using the internet, like we asked ourselves in the 90s. That same question needs to be asked by every employee, every American today with regard to AI.
There is a lot to unpack there, but takeaway, we're all getting a new job description of one kind or another. Maybe let's start with some of those safety issues, because we've had some discussions around that already today. What do developers have to have in mind when it comes to safety? Like, what are the top priorities? And then, from the sounds of your answer, they don't just have to have safety in mind. They have to show their work. They have to prove to customers that they've done that work. So what's the best way for developers, or how does Salesforce demonstrate, hang on, we don't just have trust as a brand, like we've built it in?
Yeah, what does that mean? So, I mean, first of all, I like to think of it in terms of the 3 H's and the 4 D's, just to help people remember. So the 3 H's, what should AI be? It should be helpful, it should be harmless, and it should be honest. And there's all kinds of things, technology-wise, guardrails-wise, that you can build in to do that. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. In terms of the 4 Ds, this is what AI, these are the big risks of AI that we need to think about, again, both as technology builders and providers, as well as policymakers. We don't want, we want to make sure that the AI, we're being very careful about data leakage and data privacy issues. That's the first D. Then disinformation, discrimination, and we have to think about displacement. Because just like with the internet, a lot of jobs are going to change. Some jobs are going to be created. Some jobs are going to go away. And so as a society, as policymakers, as a community, how do we come together and really help society prepare? Now, in terms of how Salesforce thinks about managing the 4 Ds and the 3 H's, it really starts at the technology layer. And we've built something called the Einstein trust layer that underlies all of our AI, whether it's predictive AI or it's this new class of generative AI applications. And it's features like citations, Do I know where this particular answer is coming from? Can it point back to the document and reference the official document that it comes back from so that I can actually check the work? I can fact check it. It includes features like data masking. There's a lot of customer data in Salesforce. A lot of that you may not want to send into a large language model. So how do we mask that data? We have toxicity filters and both input and output. So within customer data, as you can imagine, there's certain fields of customer data that we found in our testing that tend to introduce bias in AI models. For example, even someone's first name. It could be someone's zip code. It could be their gender. And so these can be marked either automatically by us or customers have the ability to choose. They can mark these as sensitive data fields that, again, get withheld from what gets sent to the large language model. And then once the output is generated, we also have another set of checks through a toxicity filter that our research group has developed. So we also keep an audit trail every step of the way, what was provided into the model, what came out. And so there's a number of features from an engineering perspective that we've actually engineered into our Einstein AI products. So that's the first level. Yeah. The second is from a product policy standpoint. It's been very important for us to think about how our technologies can be used and to put those governors in place into the platform itself. It's not really the underlying technology, but it's a policy that we choose to build into the product. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One is that when there's a bot that is calling a customer or that a customer is chatting with, our policy is, regardless of which customer is using that with their customer, that it has to self-identify as an AI. That the ultimate end customer who's engaging with this bot, regardless of whether, again, it's phone or it's messaging or it's email, that they know that they're actually dealing with an AI versus an actual person. Another example is that we disallow use of facial recognition as part of our products for, again, a lot of bias types of reasons. So there's that product policy aspect. And then finally, our Office of Ethical and Humane Use of Technology and AI, we've been very proactive in sharing our principles for responsible AI. We've open sourced these principles, and we're trying to teach every software company and every one of our customers how to adopt these principles and implement them in their products and customer terms of service.
You reminded me of a conversation I had this morning. I do interviews at 7 in the morning sometimes, and I was chatting with an Infosys executive, and he was saying that the ethical aspects are one of the elements of AI policy that really should be driven centrally, but that, of course, because AI affects every part of your organization, you also need to have decentralized parts of rolling out AI and training people. Would you agree with that perspective, that ethics is so central that it has to come from the top, that it comes from Mark and people like yourself inside Salesforce, and with your customers, you want the really senior executives having that ethical discussion from the beginning?
That's right, and it kind of ties back to the earlier discussion about does AI change management happen top down or bottom up?
Yeah.
So there are certain things like ethical principles, guardrails, providing a secure environment like the Einstein Trust Layer for your employees. That needs to be enabled top-down by the CEO, by the Chief Information Technology.
Because you have to have one system. You can't have 5 systems inside the company. Yeah.
Nor is it wise, I think, for some organizations have blocked generative AI entirely, just like there were organizations in the 90s that blocked the internet.
Yep.
And they told their employees they couldn't use the internet because of the risk concerns. So I don't think that's the right call for most companies and industries. It's kind of hurts your business competitiveness long term. What's better is to offer a safe environment and to provide training and resources. And then, employees have to go through that training and take the initiative to actually start using these technologies and write new job descriptions of how they spend their time.
Yeah. One last sort of politics and policy question before we get more into workforce and education. We've had a pretty productive discussion in Washington over the past year. I want to say that people have genuinely listened. They want to be better informed about AI, but we're in that zone of good intentions still, like not a huge amount of action. So are you sort of satisfied with where the conversation is and where it's going, or is there something else that needs to happen to move to more comprehensive regulation?
Well, I've never worked in Washington and in the government and had the opportunity to be a public servant, and I appreciate everybody, all of you who are. I think it's so important, and I know there's a lot of work that has been going there. I'd say as a layperson coming from the private sector, I have been pleasantly surprised by the level and quality of dialogue that I'm hearing, especially in this country, about what some of the opportunities are and also some of the risks. One of the areas where that I see as a big opportunity for us is, there's been a lot of discussion about what not to do and what to disallow, and certainly, especially using and updating existing laws that we have. You just heard Commissioner Gomez reference the TCPA. Absolutely, that's an existing law. It's a perfect vehicle for making sure that these robocalls from AI, right, are also forbidden or consumer opted in. And so there's a lot of discussion already about what we disallow. I think there's an even bigger need, an equal need, to talk about what new policies we need to create about what we should be doing.
Yep.
Right. When I think about education, for example, K-12 education, I have young kids in elementary school, and I don't know if they're learning the skills that they need to be successful in an AI economy.
I think you do. I think they're not learning them.
They're
Isn't
not
that
learning
the point?
them. That's right. And I recognize it's very difficult, right, because it's state by state. There's a lot that needs to be happening, but that's a dialogue that I don't hear enough about, that I'd like to, just as a citizen, I really want to make sure that lawmakers and members of government, that we're really talking about what we should be doing, not just what we shouldn't be doing.
Yep. Well, putting on President for a Day plus Salesforce CEO hat, combining forces here, what would you do to inject more AI or better understanding and skills of AI into the K-12 system? Like, obviously, we need to, in our own workplaces as adults, get some retraining and some upskilling. But what do kids today need to have built into their future opportunities?
Yeah, I think every job is going to be transformed by AI. And for us to help educate the workers of tomorrow, every single person, every single child in America needs to learn how to use AI to be more effective. They also, though, need to understand the limitations of AI, that AI often hallucinates, they make up facts. And so being able to, more than ever, right, understand footnotes and citations and doing your homework and not just taking it as is. I think social media was a perfect example of people not realizing that these algorithms were manipulating our thoughts. And that is an awareness that every, I think, student in America should go through, is understanding, okay, these are just algorithms. This is not truth just because I see it on the internet. This is not truth just because Bard or ChatGPT tells me so. I should have a healthy level of skepticism, and I should follow these steps to be able to fact check what is being presented to me before I formulate an opinion.
So it's almost like AI literacy as an extension of digital literacy, not just, go and learn how to code. Like, there are other softer skills that people are going to need to have here.
Yes, not just learning how to code, but also learning how to code. So that's where I was going to go next. So one is, how can I use AI to be more effective? Instead of banning ChatGPT for essay writing, how do we teach kids when to use it and how to still be a critical thinker when you have this amazing tool?
How to know what you don't know. That's what I'm really hearing.
That's right. Similar to in the 90s, right? All of a sudden, or the 80s, when spreadsheets were invented, you're not going to not teach kids how to use spreadsheets, but they have to understand how the underlying macros are formulated. They have to understand the underlying math that the spreadsheet is automating for you. And same goes for AI. And then understanding the downsides of AI and when not to trust it. And then the third piece is coding. I'm a big believer that every person, every child in America needs to learn how to code. It's becoming as important as reading and math.
Mm-hmm. One minor challenge on that point, which I wouldn't dispute that coding is really useful, but one of the big leaps forward with a lot of these generative AI tools is the natural language processing. So more people who don't have those full coding skills now have ways to ask for things to be created or delivered through AI. So I wonder sort of how your thought about the coding with these leaps forward in NLP, how does that connect into where us as adults have to take the workforce, or what we can expect to change in our own jobs over the next few years?
Yeah, I do think that the natural language interfaces of AI now do democratize who have access to it. But again, it goes back to understanding the underlying mechanisms of how it works. And even if every student isn't actually directly coding, it's important for them to understand what's under the hood and how they're getting these answers. Again, going back to the Excel spreadsheet or the graphing calculator analogy.
Now, thinking about the workforce more specifically, I'm not someone that thinks there's going to be massive job displacement. I think some jobs are going to go, and there's going to be massive task displacement. So elements of our jobs are going to change, and we're going to have to augment them through AI. And in a best case scenario, that's going to lead to us all doing higher value, smarter work. And we know that is not how it all works out. That is not how globalization worked out. It's not how the internet affected journalism, for example, to bring it close to my home. So I'm wondering, do you have any sort of insights about the professions that you think are going to be affected first, or where you see people already moving to that higher value work?
Yeah, so I have many thoughts on this. I mean, first is I think we don't know what we don't know. And I'll share an example. You know, for many years, the conventional wisdom, even in the technology industry, was that if you are a creative, you'll be safe from AI, right? But we're seeing now that AI is actually really good at generating images and even video. Right? That movie, Everything Everywhere All at Once, won multiple Oscar awards. They use generative AI to produce most of the special effects in that movie. And that movie, I think, traditionally would have had hundreds, upwards near 1,000 people working on the special effects. They were able to accomplish that with 7 people because of the AI. So this is very pronounced, and we're not always able to guess and accurately predict where AI will have impact, where it won't. So we have to be prepared and keep an open mind and continuously check in. That being said, I'm seeing a lot of reasons for optimism. And I'll just share one of my favorite examples. An early customer of Salesforce's that we partner with, I personally work very closely with to develop our generative AI products is Gucci. And in November 2021, there was a delegation that visited me and several others from Milan. And we were meeting at the Salesforce Tower in San Francisco. And it was one of the first meetings that I took post-COVID. And I remember we were all like a little nervous about actually meeting in person again. And they had an issue which so many companies did during COVID, which was being able to hire enough staff for their client services, because there's just like a lot of people suddenly wanted to work from home. They didn't want to be in a contact center. And so we focused our discussion on how do we address this client demand for wanting to get customer support, given this labor crunch, labor shortage. And so it was at that meeting that our chief scientist at Salesforce, his name is Silvio Savarese, former Stanford AI professor, he talked about the large language models that he and his team had been developing. This was a year before ChatGPT was released. And it was just such a big idea. And the customer was so forward-leaning that they said, let's experiment. Let's try it out and see if this works. And so we've been working together over the last 2.5 years. And the amazing thing is that, just learning from the client service advisors how to provide this generative AI in a way that really helps address some of the menial tasks, right? When a customer calls in and has a question, especially if you're a newly hired service advisor, rather than having to scramble to look up the answer and put the client on hold, generative AI is able to automate that and just provide that answer right there. And that client service advisor is able to focus on the client, focus on deepening the relationship. And what we found is something amazing, which is that in addition to reducing the amount of time to address support questions, it's actually empowered these client service advisors to become sellers. And to become brand storytellers because of the AI augmenting them at every step. And
did they need a lot of hand-holding? Because luxury brands are really notoriously controlling. They're not big experimenters a lot of the time. Did it take a long time to get them to yes?
We worked together. There's just been a lot of learning. And you're right, the luxury brands, it's very important to get your brand perfect, right? You can't have it just a little bit off. And so the AI we had to put guardrails in. We had to keep testing. We had to verify. We worked with the most expert client service advisors first so that they could spot when there were issues, could fix the issues. And once those issues were gone, then we scaled it out to everybody else. But it's just amazing that this team of customer support representatives, they've reinvented their careers, and now they're doing the best work of their careers. Now they're not just limited to customer support, they're brand storytellers, they're in sales. And it reminds me of the movie The Matrix, when Neo, played by
This could
Keanu
go in
Reeves,
any number of ways.
it's true. When he decides he wants to learn kung fu,
Yeah.
right? And it's like he's augmented with that skill, and then right away he knows that skill. That's how I felt seeing some of these Gucci client service advisors at work. It's like no one taught them how to sell, no one taught them how to be a brand storyteller, but it's with the AI helping them, now all of a sudden they're able to unlock this incredible potential.
And they didn't have to take a pill they didn't want to take.
That's
so,
right.
Excellent.
No drugs involved.
Clara, thank you so much. We're out of time, unfortunately, but it's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Next up on the Intersect stage, Tracy Owens, Director, U.S. Public Affairs at Sage.
Good afternoon. As you just heard, my name is Tracy Owens, and I lead public affairs for the U.S. at Sage. I'm also a very proud alumnus of Morehouse College, and absolutely, I'm grateful for the opportunities that Morehouse has provided me, and I'm even more grateful and proud of the opportunities that it's continuing to provide for students. And you'll hear a little bit more about that later. But before I discuss more about Morehouse, let me tell you a little bit more about Sage. For those of you who don't know, Sage is a UK FTSE 50 tech company founded just over 40 years ago with a market cap of about 10 billion pounds. We have about 11,000 colleagues globally, and Sage is a market leader in accounting, financial, HR, and payroll technology for small and medium-sized businesses who make up about 99% of the U.S. economy. We enable them to streamline operations, make more informed decisions, and be more productive, freeing business owners and their workforces from repetitive and administration tasks, and enabling them to deliver more strategic and higher value tasks, ultimately increasing their productivity. While we're globally headquartered in the UK, in the US, we're headquartered in Atlanta, a rapidly growing and entrepreneurial community. And we have a number of investments there, including a new building that quadruples our square footage space in Atlanta at Pond City Market, and also a lot of investments in skills programs to support entrepreneurs. Our company purpose is to knock down barriers so that everyone can thrive. Sage is committed to working together with the right partners to build a trusted and inclusive digital economy. Our AI vision is a world where business leaders have real-time trusted information about their business's financial performance to guide their strategy. To scale and grow the digital economy sustainably, we need a diverse, high-performing human culture. With rapid advances in AI, which will have a profound and we believe ultimately positive effect on work, there's never been a more important time for companies like Sage to embrace community partnerships to ensure that progress is inclusive and that it can be scaled. Too often tech is rolled out with a one-size-fits-all mentality, even though it can have lasting consequences on those not considered during its development. Not having diverse backgrounds at the table risks missing out on some of the keenest insight available to make technology work at its best. That is one reason why Sage embraced the opportunity to partner with Dr. Kenneth Gaucher and Morehouse College, and that includes my sisters from Spelman College as well, to co-create the Software Engineering and Conversational AI program, providing students of color with more opportunities to use and study emerging technologies and provide mentoring and internship programs to make sure we capitalize on the talent opportunities. And I'm delighted that Dr. Gaucher and some Morehouse and Spelman students are here today. And if they wouldn't mind, they would stand for a second. I'd love for them to be recognized. Thank you. Thank you. We're also joined by a couple of my colleagues from SAGE who have been instrumental in making sure that these programs get off the ground and running and are big supporters of our efforts. So Srijit and Josh, if you wouldn't mind standing. Thank you. Dr. Gaucher and Morehouse partner with colleges across Atlanta and beyond, so the wider opportunity to participate in broadening the impact on diversifying the tech industry can be amplified. SAGE sees this not only as doing what is right and just, but also as what we should be doing to build strong communities and removing barriers to success. Diversifying the workforce in general, and tech specifically, brings some of the greatest brain power available to creating the best products and services possible. Diversifying tech, though, is not enough, as we also believe that making sure small businesses have an opportunity to thrive, particularly those who have had historical and systemic barriers placed in front of them. So SAGE not only wants to increase diversity in the tech systems that service customers, we want to make sure we're providing these services to those who need them most in the marketplace. Our efforts are concentrated on elevating human work by solving our customers' needs, by eliminating the repetitive and focusing on building trust. Building trust requires that we have the most diverse thinking available and at the table. AI is set to contribute significantly to modernizing and re-envisioning accounting roles, making them more appealing to a new generation of talent from all walks of life. AI can handle routine tasks like transaction processing and error spotting, improving work-life balance by handling entire sets of tasks autonomously. AI also supports work-life balance and remote work, fitting right into the demand for a new workforce that's emerging. Diversity in tech not only does not just mean for the technical roles, it means diversity across the entire company. It all works together to build the best products and services for customers. To be clear, technology does not belong to one company. It's far bigger than that. As we know, the talent will likely not just work for us, but likely for a lot of people and a lot of companies in this room right now. So it is incumbent that all of us participate in building the next great workforce, and it helps lift all communities and make sure that the work we do is the best it can possibly be. In closing, I would state that SAGE is working hard to change how tech provides for a more inclusive environment that helps build the next great workforce. Partnerships like Morehouse are just a part of it, but a very important part. More is needed, and we're certainly committed to doing more towards that effort. Collectively, we can make a huge difference, and we look forward to working with many of you in this room on the journey, and we hope that we can make a real big difference in how the tech workforce and beyond looks into the future. So thank you very much.
Please welcome back Jason Oxman with Mayor Stephen Benjamin, Senior Advisor to the President and Director of the White House Office of Public Engagement.
Well, thanks so much for being here with us. Thanks for making the trip over from 1600 Pennsylvania to join us. It's such a great honor to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jason. I don't live at 1600 Pennsylvania. I just work there.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, thanks for taking the trip over from work. The work you're doing on behalf of the Biden administration is really focused on engaging communities like ours, the tech industry, and other constituents to help drive the priorities of the administration. And we appreciate, first and foremost, how much you have given us the opportunity to participate in that process and help you succeed in the important efforts you're driving forward. One that's top of mind for all of us in the tech industry is the CHIPS and Science Act and the implementation that's taken place there. So I wanted to ask for your perspective on that. And obviously the bipartisan infrastructure law is also a big part of your focus, and implementation work is underway there. But let's start with CHIPS and the work that's happening there. What's your assessment of how that's going? What still requires work and effort, and what can we do to help support the important work you're doing to make that happen?
Oh, sure. So first of all, thank you. I mean, I believe the two most powerful words in the English language are thank you. My wife says they're actually yes, ma'am, but I still think they're thank you for having me. And thank you for the partnership. I mean, the reality is that the role that we do in public engagement, for those of you who haven't had the opportunity to work with us in the past, is you have the three estates of government. You have the fourth estate, represents the media, and then you have the fifth estate. Those of you in this room, civil society, who work every single day as subject matter experts proximate to the real challenges facing the country. We work together to try and make sure that not only are we proselytizing, raising up the president and vice president's priorities, but more importantly, we're doing what my grandmother would say, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You're supposed to listen twice as much as you talk. So we engage with you, engage with ITI, and we get critical feedback that hopefully helps us do our jobs better every single day. That's what the president's asked us to do, and we try and do it. The Investing in America agenda in its entirety has been incredibly successful. I mean, we see it every other week with new economic announcements around job creation, manufacturing job creation, obviously returning critical supply chains, and the announcements around chips that we saw really challenged during the pandemic. We're seeing the benefits of it. I was pulling up some of the statistics on the infrastructure bill, which has been an amazing opportunity, not just to show what we can do. I'm a former mayor, as my title suggests. I served as mayor of Columbia, South Carolina for 12 years. And we come up here every other month for Infrastructure Week. And finally, to truly get an infrastructure decade that's now helping build 136,000 miles of road, almost 8,000 bridge projects, over 14 million new jobs across this country. We've seen unemployment at historic lows, under 4% for now 2 years running. We're seeing really smart place-based economic development, again, when it comes to chips in particular, bringing back critical supply chains, helping create high-wage jobs, including high-wage jobs for people who don't necessarily have to have significant or advanced degrees. It's allowing us a degree of security and allowing more and more people access to the middle class. I think unlike any other time, maybe in American or world history. These are exciting times that I believe as important as the public investment, maybe more importantly, is the reality is that while these numbers that we see, if it's 1.2 trillion infrastructure or what we're seeing on the chips or even the American Rescue Plan, these numbers represent they represent leverage. It's a significant investment that actually is being complemented much more aggressively by the private sector in partnership with the public sector. Over $500 billion in private sector announcements complementing these public sector investments. And if we do this right, it'll pay benefits for posterity in helping improve the health of our economy and certainly the health of our families.
One other area of this digital and infrastructure investment that the administration's been very focused on, and you've been focused on, is addressing the digital divide.
Yes.
And making sure that all Americans have access to broadband, which is an important goal given how indispensable broadband is in all aspects of life, from access to education, to medical care, to future opportunities. And we know that the digital divide is pervasive, and Congress, on a bipartisan basis, has supported a lot of programs that help invest in closing the digital divide. The Affordable Connectivity Program, the ACP, which according to the FCC will close tomorrow because Congress hasn't started it back up again, is one of those programs. Can you talk to me a little bit about the President's interest in continuing this work, your view of how the digital divide needs to be addressed, what Congress should be doing to help foster more and broader access to broadband for all Americans?
Sure, and I'm not sure if Alan Davidson has gone up yet or not.
He hasn't, he's up next.
Not yet. So Alan and I, as a colleague, I chaired the FirstNet Responder Authority at at the Department of Commerce and the incredible work he's doing through NTIA to help build out 21st century infrastructure. I mean, literally making sure that every community in urban America, suburban America, and rural America actually has access to the internet. It is something that, as you mentioned, in every field of life is necessary right now. I think it's moving somewhere, maybe in the neighborhood $90 billion or what have you. The success, however, of this really wonderful partnership with internet providers that has manifested itself in the ACP program, really, it can't be overstated how important this is. Not taking new applicants as of this week, the program will expire this spring. And you think about the scale and how it got to this point. We're talking about 23 million people all across this country who are using ACP that either gives them access to free internet or significantly reduces their internet. And we've heard story after story of real families, real challenges, real issues, who, but for this program, would not have access to the internet. You think about this. Many of you are familiar with the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP program. As long as SNAP's been around, there are only 21.9 million people on SNAP. So already 23 million people using ACP, again, in a wonderful partnership. So I have responsibilities. I used to be a politician, now I work for the government, so I can't tell you to go do something and advocate. But for those of you who do have a voice, it's really important that the same bipartisan leadership that yielded ACP, we really need to make sure that everyone steps up and make sure we continue to provide these opportunities for families all across this country. And the good thing about it is when you reach that kind of scale, 23 million people, it really does affect everyone in every community all across the country. It's worth advocating for and fighting for. And hopefully and prayerfully, Congress steps up and allows us to continue the program and maybe even continue to expand it.
The President's been out on the road a lot in recent weeks and months talking about the importance of all this infrastructure investment. The CHIPS Act obviously is bringing a lot of great construction projects to a number of places around the country, and obviously it's important for the nation's national security for that success. I wanted to ask you, particularly given that you spent 12 years as a mayor, how we can help local communities, states, and municipalities understand the importance of all this investment, understand the importance of all the investment in infrastructure, the upgrades to systems, the technology investment, obviously, that the ITI members are doing. How can we help the rest of the country understand how important these investments are, how much they're helping with economic growth and development, creating job opportunities? What's the story we should be out there talking about?
Oh, no. I will tell you, I'm a former mayor. I'm also former president of the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the former president of the African American Mayors Association, and forever president of the Mayors Mutual Admiration Society. I will tell you that mayors get it. They see these significant investments, but it does help to have partnerships with each and every one of you who are true leaders in this field and subject matter experts to make sure that everyone understands that these are not one-time investments. If you build a thoughtful partnership, it allows you to strategically invest for posterity. I mean, prayerfully, we won't have another pandemic anytime soon or any other significant economic or social disruptions. But we should always be thinking about how we build for the future. So when I talk about these investments being strategic and leverage for longer term tiered investments from the public, private, and philanthropic sector, that can't be overstated. So it certainly helps to communicate that with local leaders on a regular basis, realizing that all cities have something in common, but many, these are really thoughtful, place-based investments that take in the unique characteristics of each community and the assets that they have. So I will tell you, if you don't already have a relationship with the mayor in the city that you work, or you have a significant number of people, I would encourage you to reach out to her, reach out to him, figure out ways in which you can inform each other as to how to make sure these investments, again, not only affect me and you and our children, but our children's children and their children after them.
Last thing I wanted to ask you about is STEM education and workforce opportunities. We heard Tracy from SAGE talking about, we got a great group from Morehouse here visiting with us, including Dr. Kenneth Gaucher, I believe is here, who, Tracy didn't mention this, is responsible for producing more black male graduates with masters and PhDs than any other professor in the country. And I did not just make that up. The technology industry is focused, with the help of people like Dr. Gaucher and the great people at Morehouse, in creating STEM opportunities for historically underrepresented communities. I know the Biden administration is very focused on this as well. All this infrastructure investment we're talking about, companies need more skilled workers. What's the focus there?
All right, so I was ear hustling in the back like my teenage daughters do. I heard Morehouse and Spelman. Did they hear Spelman as well? All right. I have a freshman at Spelman, so my heart and my money go to Spelman College. So I have to shout out Spelman as well. No, the investment in a talent pipeline, the domestic talent pipeline, can't be overstated. It is important to our national security. It's important to reach deep and wide also in building this talent pipeline. That's going to have to serve us for many years to come. I would encourage you, if you are already investing in your companies and making sure that we dramatically widen and deepen the talent pool of these amazing young people, like those at Morehouse and Spelman and other colleges all across the country, I will tell you, you're missing out. And I'm not just talking anecdotally. Data shows that when you invest in a truly diverse talent pool and you build up that infrastructure internally here domestically, you do well. It creates alpha. You profit from it. So I'd encourage you to do so. It is critical. And again, every job doesn't require a terminal degree. There are different people that will all benefit and allow us to do what the president always says. We're trying to build an economy from the bottom up and the middle out. If we do that, working people will do so much better than the middle class. Will continue to grow, and certainly those who do really well will continue to prosper as well. So again, thank you all. I think is our time up?
It is.
Okay, so thank you all for all that you do. Looking forward to continuing to work with you on behalf of the President and Vice President to continue to get the job done. God bless y'all.
Thank you. Mayor Stephen Benjamin. Thank you so much. Here we go this way.
Joining us now, Nate Tibbetts, ITI board member and Senior Vice President of Global Government Affairs at Qualcomm.
Hey everybody, it's a genuine pleasure for Qualcomm to support this event again this year, and I really want to thank the ITI team for all their hard work it takes to produce another fantastic Intersect event. It's clear that American ingenuity drives research and development, propelling us to new technological futures. And policies that promote R&D and strong patent protections will ensure American companies maintain their technology leadership. The United States is set to play a pivotal role in shaping the standards that will guide the future of AI. Just as Qualcomm played a pivotal role creating wireless technology that fueled the mobile revolution, we're now focused on democratizing the benefits of AI technology by putting access to AI in the palms of people's hands via their connected devices. In 2023, the AI discussions primarily centered around training and developing large language models. This year, the AI conversation will shift towards the proliferation of generative AI applications and AI inference, making technology both easier to use and more useful. However, as AI becomes more integrated in our daily lives, addressing responsible AI becomes increasingly urgent. It's imperative that we work collaboratively to address risks and unintended consequences. Today, we're showcasing, just outside, the world's first chipset designed to resolve the complex challenges around transparency and authenticity in digital content across smartphones worldwide. In collaboration with our technology partner, TruePic, we'll soon enable devices that can add content credentials to any image output, whether synthetic or authentic. Addressing these challenges necessitates strong collaboration between the private sector and public sectors. And really, who better to guide us through these pivotal discussions than Administrator Alan Davidson of the National Telecom and Information Administration, NTIA. Before we welcome him, by way of introduction, let's take just a moment to applaud the administration's forward-thinking investments. Notably, the BEAD funding and the Open Radio Access Network Initiative, or ORAN, through the Public Wireless Supply Chain Innovation Fund, driving American connectivity and innovation. This effort fuels a relentless cycle of innovation, testing, deployment, empowering companies to leverage their R&D investments and unleash the power of market competition. Additionally, we commend NTIA's work on the National Spectrum Strategy, which is a crucial blueprint for ensuring American leadership in 5G advanced and 6G technologies. The shift towards an open deployment approach for 5G and beyond, bolstered by a robust spectrum pipeline and government support, highlights the pivotal role of initiatives spearheaded by Alan Davidson in collaboration with teams at the U.S. Department of Commerce and across the U.S. government. Now, with great excitement and anticipation, let's welcome Administrator Davidson to the stage, along with ITI President and CEO Jason Oxman, to share their invaluable insights on navigating the future of AI and technology policy.
Thanks, Nate. Appreciate the support of Qualcomm, and hello again, everybody. I have, please.
Thank you.
Alan Davidson joins us as he did last year and as he had in prior events, and we're thrilled to have you back. Welcome.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks. Great space.
It is a cool space, and it's a beautiful day, inside and out. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us. A lot on your plate that's of relevance to the ITI membership. In fact, nothing on your plate is not of relevance to the ITI membership.
That's good to hear. So we're working on a lot of things.
You are indeed. Let's start with AI. You were referenced in the executive order, and work is underway under a very tight timetable, not given a lot of time. And in fact, I think the first 90-day deadline expired on a Sunday, and that wasn't even moved. So can you talk to us about what you have the team prioritizing and what you need from us in order to accomplish the lofty goals for NTIA AI activity?
Absolutely, and thank you for, first of all, thanks for having me, and it's great to be here. And as actually a former ITI board member in a past life, it is really always nice to be back joining you.
Nice
so
to have
congratulations on what you've been doing.
Thank you.
And I will say it's an exciting and interesting time to be working in this space, and you've been hearing a lot, everybody's been hearing a lot about it already today, right? That responsible AI innovation is going to transform our economy. It's hard to imagine a sector of the economy that's not going to be touched by all of this, and it's going to bring a lot of benefits to people. That is, I think, the strong belief at NTIA across the administration. We need to promote that innovation, but we also know we're only going to succeed in this if we ensure that we are also addressing the serious risks that are out there, risks that exist today, not speculative risks, but risks about security, privacy, bias in systems. So we're thinking across the board about all of these things. And you've seen, I think, with a sense of urgency, the way that government is addressing this. Like, I think we're early still in the life cycle of all of this, and yet people are jumping in, and I think appropriately. So you saw the set of commitments that we were able to get from leading AI companies this summer, incredibly important. The executive order, which people have talked about and which we're now implementing against, very important, very ambitious. The work we're doing internationally with the G7. And NTIA has been part of all of that. We serve as the president's principal advisor on telecommunications and information policy. We're deeply engaged in this AI policy space. For us right now, there's a couple of big projects teed up. We're doing a big report on AI accountability and auditing that we started over a year ago. We've got a big homework assignment on open model weights in AI. I'd love to tell you more about that. We're also doing a lot of work at the policy level internationally in the coordination of all this. So there's a lot going on. We're excited to be a big part of what's happening within the administration.
That's great. I'll give you the opportunity to talk about open model weights in AI if you address a rumor off the record, just between you and me, that NTIA is considering changing its name to NTAI.
Who's talking about AI these days? Why would we do such a thing? No, he's completely joking. I think it would require action by Congress actually to change our name.
Probably.
But a guy can dream. We are doing a lot in this space and on this issue around open model weights, or what we call widely available model weights. This question of what some people have been calling sort of open source AI. It's a really hard problem. And we got a homework assignment in the executive order to produce a report for the president by the end of July, so we're on the clock, about what our approach to these these open AI systems should be. And I'll say there's real risks and benefits in the idea of openness here. There's real concern about safety. If you open up models and let them be used without, the kinds of safeguards that necessarily might be built in otherwise, what are the risks? At the same time, we know there can be benefits too to openness. And I think there's a concern within the administration, a competition concern, if there are only a small number of companies that control the most important models. And openness can be an approach to that. So this is going to be an ongoing conversation. I think the good news is that we've learned already that there's sort of gradients of openness. It's not a binary thing. And I think that may provide us with a path to think about how we address this. Stay tuned for more report coming out in July.
Speaking of things that require further activity and action on reports, spectrum strategies. So NTIA, as you mentioned, is the principal telecom advisor to the president. Occasionally, the president has to issue public reminders of that, as he did with the FAA. But we're not going to talk about that. But what we are going to talk about is the national spectrum strategy, and that was a comprehensive, almost overwhelming effort to bring some direction to the future course of activity in this area. I don't know how you have enough people to do all the work that you've been assigned to do, but this is another one that has some tight timetables. Tell us where the latest area of activity is on that.
So this is a super interesting and important area for our country, and one that doesn't always get, kind of the airtime, no pun intended. Sorry, there are not a lot of great spectrum jokes out there that it deserves. It's probably one of our nation's most important resources and also one of our most scarce resources. The demand for spectrum continues to increase. We need it for all of the connected devices that we know and love. The federal government needs it from everything from aviation radars to defense missions, satellites to monitor the climate. All that powered by spectrum, and we need to do a good job of managing the scarce resources that we've had. For the last 2 years, we have been working on a national spectrum strategy, which we've been overdue to have in this country, and I'm so pleased we were able to release one at the White House this November. Thank you for joining us at that event.
Thank you for the invitation. It was great to be there.
And it lays out a path for how we're going as a country to tackle this hard challenge in front of us, this very hard challenge about making sure we can feed the pipeline of spectrum needed for private sector use and also make sure we have enough for our federal missions. And we laid out a 4-part strategy. It includes a pipeline of spectrum to study over the next couple of years, work on new spectrum technologies like dynamic spectrum sharing, new collaborations with the private sector, and a real attention to the workforce in this space. We need more RF engineers out there. All the kids today want to study, machine learning, but we also there's good jobs in understanding the spectrum, and we need more people in the space.
Yep. So a lot of work to be done on the spectrum strategy, and of course this is unfortunately outside of your purview, but Congress hasn't moved forward on a couple of issues that are relevant to NTIA's work. One is spectrum auctions, which I know many have expressed concern about auction authority expiring. What's the real life impact of that, and what are your hopes? Again, recognizing that you don't have a voice in Congress, what are your hopes for getting that issue resolved?
Well, I think it is kind of crazy that we don't have spectrum auction authority for the FCC. The chairwoman has spoken pretty eloquently about how important that is for their continued work in this space. And if we're going to continue to have a smart spectrum strategy for this country, we need to have that auction authority reinstated. And we're hopeful that there'll be an opportunity to do that. I think a lot of people on both sides of the aisle understand the importance of it.
Yep. Let's talk about broadband more generally, because this is another area where somehow you have people on staff who are working on this issue.
You know, NTI is kind of like a startup in government. I've been in the chair for about 2 years.
Yeah.
Almost 40% of NTI, over a third, almost 40% of NTI is brand new since I started in the last 2 years. So we've had to grow a lot for this, a lot of it for our broadband work, but it's fun to run a startup, and it's hard to do it in government. But yeah, we've grown a lot.
That's good. So let's talk about the broadband work. What's most important from your perspective of the work that's underway?
Right. So it is a historic moment. We have this incredible opportunity. We've been talking about the digital divide for over 25 years. In the bipartisan infrastructure law, we finally got the resources to do something serious about it. The president's given us a mission, very simple: connect everyone. Everyone in America makes me nervous. He says that all the time, with reliable, affordable, high-speed internet service. And we are well on the way. I mean, this is going to be a years-long project. It's going to take a ton of work. We've got grant programs that are in flight. Middle Mile, $1 billion out the door, $2 billion in tribal funding, connectivity funding out the door. And now we're doing digital equity plans with every state. And now the big money, which is our $42 billion state grant program, is in flight. This year will be a big year at the states. Last year, we got plans in at the end of the year from every state about how they're going to spend the money that we're going to be giving them. This year, they're going to implement those plans. So all eyes turn to the states. They're going to start doing their grant making. We need everybody's attention. This is kind of an all-hands-on-deck moment. I will say, even as we're looking ahead at this, money that's going to come, the truth is money is being spent right now to connect people. The early programs we started implementing, like our broadband infrastructure program, we've now passed over 36,000 homes passed with the infrastructure that we've built and funded through that. So there's real people being connected right now. There's a lot more to come. We are not going to get tens of billions of dollars from Congress to do this again, so we've got to get it right.
Last question I want to ask you, because you've touched on a lot of areas of activity that are relevant to the tech industry. Some of them are areas that you've been working on for decades at NTIA. Some of them are areas you've been working on this year for the first time. For industry, what do you need help with? Where are the areas, the gaps in knowledge, education, partnership programs, inputs into all of these different areas, or perhaps areas you haven't even talked about, that industry can be helpful and be of service to you as you endeavor to accomplish these ambitious goals?
That is such a great invitation. I will say the list is long.
Yes.
Right. You've heard a lot about AI, but the truth is it's worthy of our attention right now. And I think getting smarter, understanding, I just talked about this open model weights project. It's a big deal for us to figure these things out. These are cases of first impression. We need to be smart with industry. We've got a lot going on in like sort of the old internet policy issues, privacy. I'm co-chairing a big task force on kid safety right now, figuring out how we could come up with good industry best practices. We're doing a big workshop out in Stanford. We just announced on March 13th to get industry input on this convening out there. So that's another area. Broadband. We need ACP funding. That's another thing that's important out there. You've heard about that earlier today, I know. But just making sure that it's all hands on deck paying attention. We just need more, I'll just say, people who have dual competency in government, who can understand technology and talk about the policy implications and do this crossover. We really appreciate the partnership with folks in industry, folks in the nonprofit world who help us understand these issues better. So thank you for your leadership in this space. Thanks to ITI and to everybody who's here for being part of the conversation.
Well, thank you. You just talking about the intersection between the technical know-how and the policy chops, you've described yourself. We're very lucky to have you in this role.
Well, the Intersect, this is what we're all about,
that's
right?
That's what we're all about. Please join me in thanking Alan Davidson for sharing his thoughts with us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. We go this way.
Please welcome Ann Neuberger, Deputy Assistant to the President and Deputy National Security Advisor, Cyber and Emerging Tech at the National Security Council, and Barbara Humpton, President and CEO of Siemens USA.
And I'm so glad that we are together. And actually, I'm just so glad that Jason has given Siemens the chance to be your interviewer for this last segment of the day. I love our conversations that we get to have. For those of you who don't know Siemens, it's a company that has been working in the field of infrastructure our whole history. And if the last couple of decades have been about creating the Internet of people, the way we entertain ourselves, the way we engage with as a consumer, now the world is recognizing that we're introducing the Internet of Things, and it's an order of magnitude larger than the Internet of People. And so the key questions of cybersecurity and the use of AI are coming to infrastructure everywhere, and here you are smack dab in the middle of all that. And where I'd love to start, I know we all have questions about the executive order, et cetera, but you're in a role where it would be tempting to focus solely on risk, and yet you also focus on opportunity. Tell me about the balance that you're working to achieve.
Absolutely. So first, it's great to be here with all of you. It's great to be here with you, Barbara. One of the great things about ITI, thank you to our hosts, is it really connects companies and government as we map policy, because as a country, to your question, we are the leading innovator on the global stage. America's economy is the largest in the world because we encourage innovation, and we really want to be a leader in not only in technology, but technology evolves in many fields. So Barbara and I have had many conversations about cybersecurity, about telecom policy, as part of that goal. So when we think about, to your question, the promise and peril of AI, I know this is the end of a day. You've had many, many discussions here. So I thought I'd answer it in the context of a few examples of where we see both, and to give us to kind of think about how we bring that together. So in the area of promise and peril, to your first question on cybersecurity, two areas. So the same models that can help us really help a coder analyze code to find vulnerabilities, to find holes that a malicious attacker would look for to exploit, to improve the code, to make it stronger, to make it harder to exploit. In the hands of a malicious attacker, those same models help them find vulnerabilities that have been unpatched, that have not been secured, to use those to build more focused malware for a particular product. So that's an example of where essentially what we really want to do is ensure that cyber defenders are using those models first, that we're improving products as we build them before we deploy them, as well as then using those to find vulnerabilities in the most important products deployed across our water systems, our power systems, to patch them first. One example. I think a second one, which always touches my heart, is my husband and I have been involved in a charity that deals with individuals with ALS. And people with ALS essentially lose their ability to communicate, lose their ability to move, and their minds are fully intact, and their body essentially slowly disintegrates. So there are various efforts to essentially take their voices and save them so that as the individual is only communicating via blinking or banging their head, that's translated to words so they can actually still communicate. Clearly, we know the downsides of voice cloning. We saw it in the recording of President Biden. We see the risks of somebody sounding like a grandchild, calling a grandparent, saying they're in trouble. Why are the funds here? So clearly in the hands of fraudsters, that's a real concern. So to wrap up, we see promise and peril in a number of areas of AI, and the goal for us is to ensure on the promise side, we're moving ahead at speed while thinking from the outset, how do you do this responsibly to manage the risks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fascinating. And we are living in a world where that promise and peril go hand in hand. Let's pull the thread a little bit more about, in the world of infrastructure, in the past, people used to say, thank heavens it's not connected. But we recognize that there are threats to infrastructure, connected or not. And in fact, it might be that connecting and actually using the tools available to us today could strengthen our infrastructure. Your thoughts?
I couldn't agree more. Just about 6 weeks ago, we dealt with the Iranian government hacking connected water systems. So water systems that were connected to the internet. And they were able to have an impact on those water systems because they used the default password of 1111. It barely deserves to be called a cyber attack. And they affected water systems across 16 states. So to your point, those systems were likely not designed to be connected to the internet, but over time, it was a way to download information. Perhaps it was a way for an administrator to also get his or her email as they did their job. So security has to look at where products are used today and ensure that we can secure them appropriately. And then I have a question for you, as we build new, we have to recognize that autonomous devices will be connected to the internet. Think the infrastructure that we have, our electricity infrastructure. It has components which ideally could beacon their health, for example, after a major flood. So as people seek to bring infrastructure back online, they can see which lines are down, they can see which lines should be optimized for maintenance. So in an ideal world, we want that infrastructure to be connected to the internet, but in a way that's secure, in a way that's predictable, and in a way where we can ensure it's protected from malicious attackers. So in line with that, Siemens builds out so much connected infrastructure, connected factories, more broadly. How do you think about these new risks as new products are built, as well as you think about the broader infrastructure that you maintain?
Yeah, actually, thank you for asking, because this is one of the most creative spaces anyone can work in today. Yes, Siemens is an expert in all kinds of infrastructure, as you mentioned, the power grid, transportation networks, factories, buildings. There's control technology in all of those things. And frankly, people couldn't even envision a connected infrastructure, call it 4 decades ago. So the idea of the way things were designed previously was fundamentally different. Here we live today in a world where we're able to put these tools to use. We have a research and development department that is constantly scanning the environment. We know that the value we can bring today is bringing the real and the digital worlds together across all of this built infrastructure. Now, since 1970, researchers have been working with technologies like artificial intelligence. Fantastic. The key question is, how do we apply all these new technologies to the world that we live in? And we've been speaking in terms of industrial AI. Instead of using general AI on all of the internet, we can create trusted data sets using, say, a utilities or using a manufacturer's own data. Imagine a world in which you actually do have sensors on all of your equipment. You're producing so much information, you simply can't process it all. But now with AI, we can. So with about 2,000 AI experts across the global organization, with about 1,400 cyber experts likewise working hand in hand with product developers, we're constantly evolving our design processes and standards so that we're actually building these things in. The concept is technology with purpose, making sure that we're using our best imagination to imagine both the upside we're trying to achieve as well as the potential unintended downsides and how to best build protection.
It's really interesting because when we think about the most critical cybersecurity risk as a country. What we're most concerned about are malicious countries or criminals hacking and disrupting the water, power, or pipeline systems that Americans rely on every day, as individuals and as companies. Those power companies, those water companies, are largely owned by private sector entities. And during the Biden administration, we fundamentally made changes to the model of how those systems are secure, while still working to keep the close partnership between the nation's critical infrastructure companies and the government. So we have a couple of examples of that you and I were talking about a bit in the green room that I want to lift up here and get your thoughts on. So the first was, we're one of the last countries in the world to put in place minimum cybersecurity standards for pipelines, for water systems, to prevent the kind of thing I described, where a foreign government could hack into a water system merely by identifying and trying default passwords. And I'll note that what was interesting was there were 16 systems, if I recall correctly, that were hacked. All of those had the default passwords. Additional systems that didn't weren't successfully hacked. So it just goes to show those basics, which don't cost a lot, which don't cost much money, they're those basic practices. So those are now mandated for some key sectors under existing safety rules. The second piece was a voluntary program called the Cyber Trust Mark program, which really aims to say Americans are bringing baby monitors into their homes, smart security systems, the smart doorbell systems into their homes, fitness trackers, routers in our offices, all across our schools, and we need to ensure that those devices are built secure from the start. So think about Energy Star for Cyber. Essentially, it's a program where products that meet a government standard can have the Cyber Trust Mark, and then consumers, when they're shopping in Best Buy or online at Amazon, can look for that and say, we can be safe online. And we hope to see products on shelves by the end of the year. So as you think about, as a company, the two models I just described, one is the regulatory model to kind of lift up all boats to a minimum. The second is a voluntary one to incentivize products. Frankly, it's a wild west out there, as you know, in Internet of Things devices, to be built more securely and to bring consumers into the mix, right? So they can kind of show that they value secure products as they shop. I would welcome your thoughts, how you think about those two.
We both and, right? A risk-based approach is the way we think about these things. How are these devices going to be used? And therefore, we're going to need varying degrees of assurance. First, we've set a framework for responsibility ourselves. In cyber, we established a charter of trust. This is what responsible companies should be doing for their own operations. But we also recognize that we're going to need public trust as well. And with that, a risk-based approach with increasing degrees depending on the criticality of the devices we're talking about, we believe that that's going to be an essential part of our future. And I am watching the time with dread because I could talk to you all afternoon about these topics, and I know that our audience is very interested. Two words about the EO, and let me ask you to sort of wrap in then, how do you want, as a government leader, how do you want the private sector to be engaging as an administration is launching this executive order and setting a framework for us?
So the EO is step 2 as part of a 3-step process that we see. The first was the president negotiated voluntary commitments among a key set of AI companies to say, you're building the technology, you have a responsibility to do so in a way that gains Americans' trust. Things like transparency on the data that models are trained on, rigorous red teaming, and standards for that, which don't exist yet, but we need to be building, as well as working together to ensure that when models are deployed, it's truly clear how humans are interacting with it and how they are further refined to ensure they're safe over time. So that was the first set of voluntary commitments. That was then followed by the president's executive order, a really, for folks who see it, lengthy, rigorous executive order that aimed to hit at both the items you said. Both encourage AI in areas where we see tremendous promise, government operations where we can try to make government operations more efficient, answer questions about complex areas in a simpler way, things like in the education field, where we want to encourage using AI to help tailor the way kids study, because each child studies in a different way. And also managing the risks. So for example, giving guidelines for how transparent AI models need to be if they're being used for job selection or in loans, because there are concerns. Garbage in, garbage out, to use an old tech term that I imagine in this audience everyone's familiar with. If models are trained on biased data, they will spit out, no surprise, further recommendations that are likely to reflect that as well. So those are societal issues. And then on the broader side, concerns regarding how we test the models for cybersecurity risks, for how they could potentially advance adversaries in developing different kinds of weapons that we are concerned about. So the executive order is really rigorous, and it's set very tight time frames. So for example, one I'm particularly focused on as it relates to our conversation is how models are deployed across critical infrastructure. So for example, you could see the promise in models used to add efficiency to rail systems. What should signaling systems, how should they provide guidance? Where there are humans in the loop, where the additional risk is in those, the Department of Homeland Security is receiving risk assessments from the various regulators, and we'll use that as a final step, as input to step 3, which is Congress's work to build new laws to deal with the particular risks that arise from AI. So first, the company's voluntary commitments, their steps they need to be taking. The second, work we can do within current law. And then the third, where new laws are needed. And I think as we close the call, it's really a call to action to say that as we bring the promise of AI in so many areas, that there's a partnership between the private sector and government, something ITI really focuses on, so that we're working together. So for example, the new NIST AI Safety Center that the Department of Commerce is standing up, a new leader was announced, is working to define standards for red teaming. Clearly, we need companies sharing what they learn as they red team so that that is put in place to make that testing as rigorous as it needs to be, given the important ways in which we will see AI deployed across our economy and across our society.
Well, we are in the midst of this change now, and it's real. And can I just say at Siemens, we're so proud of the members of the administration who've put these first 2 steps in, and we're working closely supporting the efforts of Leader Schumer as he is drawing in the private sector to help shape that future legislation that will be that 3rd step. These are remarkable times, and thankfully we have remarkable leaders like you, Ann Neuberger. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate all the work we do together. Thank you all for listening and for your time.
Do we exit?
Joining us now, Ashley Barang, Executive Vice President for Public Affairs at ITI.
Well, that was a terrific conversation that we just heard between Ann Neuberger and Barbara Humpton, which emphasized the vital relationship between government and industry on the future of so many critical tech policy issues. In what is sure to be a dynamic year for tech policy, ITI will continue to convene the necessary and timely conversations on the topics that are top of mind for all of you. We will continue to bring together voices from across the public and private sectors, explore pressing challenges, and help to advance opportunities for U.S. tech leadership. I want to say a big thanks to all of our amazing speakers who have joined us today to share their insights about the future of innovation. It has been an honor to have you on the Intersect stage. And also a huge thanks to our sponsors. These ITI member companies made today possible. They are Amazon, Salesforce, Cisco, NetApp, Cognizant, Accenture, Meta, Nielsen, Sage, Siemens, and MasterCard. We encourage you to share your thoughts about today's conversations on social media using the hashtag #TheIntersect2024. You can also stay up to date with all of ITI's happenings on LinkedIn or at www.itic.org. Finally, thanks to all of you in the audience for joining us and sticking with us this afternoon. Please take a moment to complete our post-event survey, which is accessible here by QR code. It is brief and will help us optimize our events programs going forward. Finally, we have a reception, so the day is not over quite yet. We hope you will join us just outside the back doors for a reception celebrating cybersecurity innovation hosted by MasterCard and NetApp. There you can also participate in activations by global innovators and network and connect with other tech policy leaders. Please join us just outside this room immediately following these remarks. Again, thanks for being part of the Intersect 2024. We'll see you soon.